one?
Correct.
So the next meeting will go, this one and. Yes. All right. So this is good because we're actually going to start our hearings a little bit early and maybe we'll get on time. Okay. So first up, we have conservation. Would like to come up, introduce yourself to everybody.
Good evening. Where do you want me to?
Right there. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Angela Panichon, the Conservation Director for the town. Thank you for having us this evening. I will start that I have not been in front of a FinCom since 2015, so bear with me on this process.
Well, we're all new faces and we're much friendlier than the guys back in 2015. Don't worry.
So,
Yeah, walk us through your budget.
the salaries did stay the same, but you will notice a change in the budget amount for Rose because for the past 2 years, she was being paid out of Todd's account until they filled the position, so. Honestly, Andrew could speak more to the rate and the number, but that's what she's been at this year to.
Yeah, so the rate's in accordance with the pay plan on the scale for the position. The number of hours had previously been, I believe it was at 28 before, and we're just going to 32 with the additional responsibilities for the construction projects that are going on, the stormwater management, the waste, and really just kind of project coordination that the office is going to be going through over the next at least year.
Why is that? Why is the director's position an hourly job and not a salary?
It is salary, but it's
But
just
you break it out.
40 out,
Okay.
40 units.
When I see hours, I just have to think. So it is salary.
So anyone that's 40 is
Is
salary.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Go on, Angela.
Do you want me to keep going down? Do you have any questions
Just
about either of those?
just touch anything that's changed or you want to highlight.
We did add in a line item for the MACC dues. That's the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissioners. And I'm not 100% sure if we added in the training or conferences, but Charlton was not part of MACC previously, which I found a bit shocking because they're an excellent resource to conservation commissions across the state. And I think it's 328 out of the 300 and however many municipalities there are all participate in MACC. It's similar to, MHOA or Mass Planners. So I joined us up this past year, so we included that in, training and conferences because continuing education is key to stay up to date with any regulation changes. A lot of regulation changes are going forward this year with DEP within the Wetlands Protection Act to address all the stormwater stuff. The EPA is required because the state's behind. And then they're incorporating more climate resiliency into sections of the regs. So attending training to be up to date with the current regulations. And then we have dam reports. There are 2 reports that we have to do this year for Office of Dam Safety. Little Nugget and Glen Echo. Those are just requirements from dam safety. And then general dam service engineering for 10,000. That is to pay our engineer, Robert Sims. There always seems to be a problem with some dam at some time. This year, the low level water control outlet at South Charlton Reservoir went, so we had to have someone check that out and fix it because it was during the drawdown. Yeah, so minor issues
Right,
there.
these are engineering expenses, not the actual cost of repair or whatever. Is that what because I'm reading, engineering expenses. This is just for
Yes.
someone to go out and say, okay, this gate needs to be rebuilt or whatever. Okay.
Stormwater, we actually cut down. It was 100 grand last year, we cut it down to 70. That's mainly because there are many things that when Rose was filling the position, we had engineers do that I'm more than capable of doing myself.
Mhm.
So this year I actually cut 52,900 out of the stormwater engineers quote for this year. Cause I just kind of went through and I'm like, no, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. So I cut that by more than half this year.
Could you teach all the other departments how to do that?
I mean, some of the stuff I was just like, you're charging us $5,000 for an annual report that will take me like 10 hours. No. Because I mean, I've done it every year in my previous job.
Mhm.
It's like you fill out a form online. That's 18 pages. But I'll keep my comments for the engineer to the engineer. But moving into year 5, I was fluctuating between 50 and 70. Because I haven't gotten a final cost because I'm not super impressed with the engineer that we've been using. So I've been asking other engineers like Time Bond that I have more experience with and I think do a better job at stormwater for budget breakdowns for year 5 requirements. So I've not gotten the final one. So it's 70 at the absolute max, but I might be able to cut that back to 50 again.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to give myself the cushion because I mean, I'll go back anyway, like this money's going back if I don't use it, so.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's to continue the phase 2 mapping, reprioritization of our problem outfalls, and to start doing, we have to prioritize 5 sites over the next 5 years to incorporate low impact development or green infrastructure to. So I'll let you know right now that those might be costly capital improvements moving forward under the MS4 program. So right now we're working to identify them based on our impaired waterways, which is a lot to do with the lakes and ponds and Katy Brook area.
Mhm.
So it would be
You
lots
say
of
we're
dream
mandated to do 5 projects.
between years 6 and 10.
Okay, so
So-
you're supposed to do 1 a year
Yeah.
and.
And next year's kind of like taking all the reports and all the 200 plus administrative things we've had to do over the past 4 years and putting them all together and pinpointing those sites and starting to come up with designs and engineerings and recommendations for the sites to move forward.
Mhm.
And the whole intent is stormwater related to,
Yep.
okay.
So instead of having a bunch of shallow catch basins around the lake that have pipes directly into the lake that put lots of sediment in and contribute to the eutrophication, which then contributes to the increase in nuisance and invasive vegetation, we would look to put in deeper sumps that would discharge 50 to 100 feet from the lake into like a rain garden to allow for infiltration, to remove the phosphorus and other pollutants instead of straight shot pipeline to the lake.
Okay.
That's just one of
No, but
them.
that's a great explanation or an example of what this money, I'm trying to figure out what would you spend all this money on, okay? That's a good example. Thank you.
We have a lot of water in town, so.
Yes.
And then the only other one we upped, the lake and pond weeding program that. I know last year they asked for 50, they got 25, we put it back up to 50 this year. Ziggy and Wayne are here to speak a little more on it, they're representatives of the Lake and Pond Committee, but over the past 5 years, the lakes and ponds, the individual associations have spent 238, we'll say round up $239,000 on treatments for invasive species.
This is what you've raised on these lake associations,
Okay,
each individual.
I'm Ziggy Waraskevich, Chairman of the Charlton Lakes and Ponds Committee. And up until last year, town of Charlton was contributing essentially zero to the lake associations to help control the weeds in the lake. So the lake associations either had, when we paid the dues, there was a amount added for weed control based on past history. And the lakes that have the ability to draw the lakes down, we lower the lakes in the fall. Because if you freeze the shoreline and then bring the water back up, it rips the weeds up. And so then you have to treat with less herbicides the following year. And so anyways, I mean, the situation varies from lake to lake. And so like over the past, 5 years, some lakes have spent over $70,000, total. And others have spent, as little as $37,000. And in fact, like Wayne can say, on Baker Pond, 1 year, the Lake Association was unable to raise enough money for the weed control that year. So they were fortunate enough, they had some residents of the lake that made a loan to the Lake Association to cover the costs. What we've done at South Charlton Reservoir is, in addition to the dues, we have a voluntary annual weed fund contribution that's kept separate from the dues. And in a checking account, there's a separate fund for weed control. And we had been treating, the milfoil, variable milfoil, which is a nuisance weed, most of the lakes in town, with what's called a contact herbicide that you have to treat every year generally, because it doesn't, it only contacts the above bottom of the lake portion of the weed, and the rhizome that the weed propagates from is still buried in the mud. In June of 2020, the state of Massachusetts finally approved a new systemic herbicide that supposedly, by getting into that rhizome and killing the rhizome, you only have to treat once every 3 to 5 years. That herbicide is much more expensive, but I mean, from an environmental perspective, if you have to only treat, once every 3 to 5 years rather than every year, it's a good way to go. And so South Charlton Reservoir made the decision to, in 2020, treat with that new herbicide. So where we had been spending anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 a year for the treatment with the contact herbicide, we spent $41,000 to treat 60 acres of our 207-acre lake. So I mean, we've been fortunate. I think, other than probably Baker Pond, that's the only one I think that I'm aware of that has had to approach the residents and say, hey, can you give us a loan to get us through this summer? And again, I mean, as a result of us maintaining the quality of our lakes, the assessor's office has our property, designated as GL, Good Lake, which means we pay a premium on our real estate taxes relative to any other site in town. In fact, just to give you an example, the average assessed value of rural average neighborhood in Charlton is $243,000. This is figures from 2020. And if it was on a lake, it's $284,000. So, I mean, our property is valued, on an average of 27% higher than any other property. And that money is going into the general fund. None of it goes back to the Lake Association to help maintain that good water quality. And so I think we're very fortunate that when Angela came on board, she said, well, gee, that's not right. He should be getting something back. So that she, tried to get the 50,000 that would be split. And the way the Lakes and Ponds Committee decided to use that money, if we're fortunate enough to get it, is that rather than just dividing by 5 the number of lakes and ponds in the Lakes and Ponds Committee, and each of them getting 1/5 of the thing, because the cost of the weed treatment varies from year to year. And like South Charlton Reservoir didn't have to treat last year because we previous year had used that systemic herbicide. So any money that we would have gotten was put back in the pool, and that was used by the other lakes and ponds that needed it. So again, I mean, anything that she can do for us certainly benefits us, and obviously, benefits the town, because if we maintain them as good lakes, the town general fund benefits as a result of that.
In towns that are, or sorry, lakes that straddle towns, we looked at different ways to kind of vary that out. So we decided to go by percentage of property tax paying residents in each. So that being Pierpoint and Baker. So one, we would subsidize 61% of whatever bill they had, because 61% of the residents in the development are in our town. The rest are in Dudley. And then the other one, Pierpoint, which was 25%. So
Okay.
it's not like we'd cover their whole entire bill, or they would get the full $5 grand. They would get, the portion based on the taxpayers.
Okay.
And
But you
then,
answered the question I was gonna have is one, who gets the money, and then how does it get distributed?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear it's not by 5, okay,
No.
that there is a rationale behind this.
Yeah.
Right, that everybody gets what they should get.
and lakes and ponds that are completely within the MS4 area, the stormwater area, where the treatments directly relate to stormwater improvements, would kind of be put up more. And in a perfect world, once we addressed the infrastructure problems and the phosphorus and nitrogen loading within our lakes and ponds through improving stormwater infrastructure, we would reduce the sediment loads and the temperatures, slow the eutrophication, and hopefully see less invasive plant growth.
Mhm.
But like I said, that's perfect world scenario.
Any further questions of Conservation Commission and their budget?
Oh, I will add one other thing. We did
Yes.
acquire Pikes Pond,
Yes, I
so
saw
the
that.
Conservation Commission, so some of the money too of that 50 grand is going to go into vegetation study assessments.
Mhm.
Not treatment yet, but
Like here, that one is infested with milfoil. Yeah.
Is it?
Yep.
My kids go fishing.
yeah,
Mine too,
water
yeah.
chestnuts, man.
Okay.
Yep.
Some pictures if you wanna look.
I
at
told them to
Pikes
start
Pond.
pulling it with their hands. Yeah. Brutal.
But I thought it could be a good Boy Scout project, and I'm gonna go hang out with the local Boy Scouts this weekend, so
That's a great idea.
run that by them, see
That's what it
what's
looks
good.
like.
Hop in the canoe, pull
Right,
some water
yeah.
chestnut.
Yeah, I just add one thing.
Yes.
So I'm Wayne Markey. I
Yes,
I actually took those photos about 18 months ago. And one of the things that we're talking about really is invasive weeds. It's not something that existed here 25 years ago. So, occasionally I've heard, well, you want money, but you used to get along without it. These are new things. And as Ziggy mentioned, on Baker Pond, we had Fanwort come in. And the only way we could really kind of save the pond, it cost us $43,000 for a treatment to really knock it back. It still is there, now we're managing it. But, we wiped out our budget plus assessments, and we were still about $20,000 short. So we got families on Pond
to either pledge $1,000 or $2,000 of a no interest loan, 5-year loan. And so we were able to come up with the money that way to do it. But I mean, we're still paying, paying the families off from that. We really couldn't do that again, you know, if we had that kind of an expense. And these are the kinds of things that it's sort of like, you know, like cancer, your money is best spent on like early detection. You know, Pikes Pond there, you know, had the residents really done something on it, you could have like pulled those things by hand. And now, you know, I could barely get my canoe through there. So the line item here is really something that's, you know, will save some money in the long term.
Okay. The only caveat I would throw out there is that none of them, if this gets approved as is, none of the money is used to pay people back. It's used for treatment, okay, or used for other things, but you don't pay back what somebody loaned you last year or the year before. That's the
Oh,
only-
no, definitely
Yeah, that's the only caveat.
I work directly with the treatment companies and they bill the town directly for services rendered at that point in time.
Yeah.
Like this year when we were, you know, our first year doing it, I wouldn't accept an invoice that went to, you know, South Charlton Lake Association. I had to have everything rerouted to the town, to the Conservation Commission, get their W-9s, handle it that way.
Good, all right, as long as it's a good check and balance.
Yeah, and then, you know, approve it and make sure it goes through the Lake and Pond Committee as well for approval.
Mhm. Okay,
Just to make you aware of it, if you aren't already aware of it, Charlton charges a boat excise tax for boats in Charlton. And
so we collect even more money from you, Ziggy? Is that where you're going with this? Okay.
fortunately, when that was put in place, 50% of that money collected on boat excise tax goes to the Municipal Waterways Maintenance and Improvement Fund.
Mhm.
So that's another source, and what we've been trying to use that for is for emergency type situations at any given lake.
Mhm.
And also, each late spring, early summer, before the weeds fully mature, we have surveys done by professionals to do a pre-treatment survey to see, oh, this is what weeds you have in the lake, this is the herbicides you need, this is how many acres you have to treat, and this is what we estimate the cost to be. So that the cost of that survey, you know, can come out of that waterways maintenance fund as opposed to the Conservation Commission budget. But I mean, and I just checked with the accounting department last week, and the balance in that fund right now is like 32,000.
Mhm.
But again, the problem we have with that is that the way to access that is you need a warrant at a town meeting,
Mhm.
and the timing is not ideal, either May or October,
Right.
because we have to do the treatment generally in, you know, late May, June, July. Because if wait too long and the weeds have already matured and dropped their seeds or whatever for future growth into the lake, then you're wasting your time and your money treating. So there's a small window of opportunity, and it always varies every year based on ice out, how quickly the water warms up and the weeds start growing. So again, if there was some mechanism where if that money is designated for maintenance and improvement of the lakes, then, you know, if there was some way that we could see that Angela wouldn't have to go to town, wait for town meeting
Yep.
to get that money released. So fortunately, last year, you know, because she had, for the first time, we had money in the Conservation Commission budget. So I mean, that saved us so that we didn't lose that window of opportunity for treating of the weeds.
Mhm. Gotcha, okay,
So I mean, the money is there.
yeah,
and
it's just, right.
It's designated for that use, but right now, it's just so difficult to get to
Yeah.
it when you need it.
Well, the two guys you want to talk to are sitting right behind you. so-
Yeah, I'll talk to Andrew, we'll figure something. Yeah, put that on the list.
Okay, so I can stay on schedule. Ziggy, Wayne, thank you very much for coming in. Any further questions of Angela while we got her? There being none, thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
guys.
nice evening.
You do the same. Too foul, set the half hour clock. All right, so next we have assessing.
Do you want me to submit those documents
I'm
that
sorry?
she, do you want me to submit those documents that she handed out?
Yes, yeah. I'll give the Jacqueline, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't take them back, right?
No.
Okay. Jason's got
Where's the weed?
pictures, and then there was the.
The weed thing.
Yeah, the page that, yeah, had the dollars.
Perfect, thank you.
Introduce yourself to the group.
Kathy
and-
Stanley, Director of Assessing. I came in at the tail end of some of that. and Some of that I could speak to, but I don't know whether that's appropriate. I do want to clear up because I addressed it in the field today as far as the waterfront properties. I know that in the past year, the values have gone up quite a bit. The entire state of Massachusetts is an ad valorem tax. That means it's a tax based on value. And right now, waterfront properties, as all properties, but even more so on the water, they've gone up quite substantially. So there isn't such a thing as a view tax or a waterfront tax. The assessor's office isn't saying, oh, it's a tax based on value. And what's the number one thing most people know about real estate?
Yeah, location.
Location, right? So yes, there's a premium of the value of a property that resides on the water. But it's not that we're taxing them at some separate and secondary rate because they have a premium. A lot of people think that. I addressed it in the field today because they thought they had a view tax and they were a waterfront property. That just isn't the way it works. It really is a tax based on value.
Yeah.
And I know some of them are on private roads, so there are those issues, but they're also private ponds too, so,
Yeah. Okay, all right. Before
if you
get
have other
started-
questions, I can answer them, but,
Hold on, Andrew, what is this?
Stuck on.
What is this white thing that's right?
That's the camera.
That's the camera?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
It just stuck in a.
If you just a little, because whoever's sitting at the table, that thing is right between me and that person. I mean, it's just-
The owl.
I didn't realize that was an actual camera.
It follows around whoever's talking.
Thank you, Karis.
I'm almost
Very
as impressed with
blurry out
that
there,
as I am with the town meeting vote button.
That's a wonderful
That I
thing.
love. That was the best money I think we ever spent. with the little buttons. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about values, please, let me know. As far as the budget is concerned, do you guys have specific questions you'd like to ask?
Okay, so what have we gone up in? I'm seeing one big increase here.
Which are you talking about?
No, actually, I always look first at the bottom line and I say,
Okay,
okay, why does it
okay.
go from here to here? Right,
So
then I go
a
back
lot
up
of
and
it,
I-
there's only a couple things that have changed. I mean, there's some salaries that have changed. The BOA did put in a request for a substantial increase from my salary. I'm happy to talk about that. The only other two things that changed were we're in a certification year and we have a Patriot contract with our software company that was signed 3 years ago. I have it here. And so that increase did go to $8,800 for that year. We also pay an appraiser to do overlook, which I'm working with the Department of Revenue now because we're in a certification year to see if we don't have to do that. So currently what's been being done is we're hiring an appraiser to appraise overlook. It's somewhat exempt and somewhat taxable. And so the DOR has wanted to get an outside third party to say, okay, what part really is which. So we've been paying a yearly fee for that, which did go up this year. But I don't think that's always going to be necessary. So I'm hoping that maybe next year we can
Mhm.
cut back on that. We do have utility companies that we now, the DOR requires that we pay to value them differently. It's a 50-50 blend between market value and replacement cost, new network cost on their assets. So that might get offset a little bit, but I'm hoping to try to bring some of those costs back down again. But for this year, we're in a certification year, so we have to fulfill the contracts that we've already signed.
Okay.
Do you have any big appeals coming in? Like the towers or solar?
that we had 31 solar ATV cases when I came last year. And so it was a lot, and the selectmen did indicate that they wanted to settle those and get through those. There's been some change in the legislation. They are personal property, so the difficulty we've had is the solar farms are sort of valued somewhat on the real estate and then separately as personal property. The personal property, they only have to pay 50% of the tax, and then they can fight it at the ATV. So that's what they did. So that's been difficult because they're accumulating a lot of uncollectible fees that we have. And personal property, you can't put it into tax title. Where if you're a real estate and you don't pay your tax bill, eventually it's going to go into tax title. We're going to have some recourse to take it. With personal property, we don't have that skin in the game legislatively. It's something that we've been working on as an association on the state level, but as of now, we don't. So we did settle those cases. So we've closed out all of our ATV cases. So we're in really good shape now as far as that goes. I mean, we had to get through that, but we've now had some clarification from the Department of Revenue as far as how to value them. Because so many communities across the state signed pilots when these solar farms came in, it was sort of like, this is the predetermined amount of tax that they're going to pay, and it's laid out for 20 years. So there wasn't a lot of other communities that were facing valuation issues. So the state sort of did a modernization to the original exemption, which was being argued by the solar companies that solar was exempt. And that was because of a law that was on the book from the 70s when you put rooftop solar on. And it was really supposed to be just for rooftop solar. But companies could claim, well, they're rerouting it to, you know, their business that they own 4 towns over, and the electricity is coming from there, so therefore it's exempt. And it won in a couple of court cases. So we were sort of up against saying, okay, what's going to happen? We're going to have to fight legislatively through the court system at cost of a lot of money to just pay the attorneys, and we don't know what the courts are going to decide. So we did end up settling those cases, and now thankfully the law has changed. That law was signed last year, but doesn't take effect until this July 1st. So then this coming July 1st, and we're in a certification year, so it's perfect. We'll be able to more in line, okay, this is what the values of those should be, and have more of a leg to stand on as far as the valuation goes, without them holding, we're fully exempt, you're gonna have to give us all our money back, which is what was happening the last few years. So it was kind of a difficult situation, but no ATV cases at the moment. So.
How many other kinds of properties do you have to bring in an assessing company or someone to help you value, like an Overlook? Is that a common?
It's not very common, no. Overlook is it, and Millennium. We hired an outside company to do Millennium. The DOR wanted that because they were going from a pilot onto, and that's why we had such a swimming in new growth, so to speak, last year that we had, because we were able to take the entire valuation of Millennium, which was 59 million, and transfer that into from exempt to taxable. And when you go from exempt to taxable, the DOR lets you collect that as new growth because it's the first time it's being taxed. And since Millennium was built originally as an exempt facility because it was under the pilot, we had special legislation for that. And we had to do some legwork to provide them with that to get them to let us count it for new growth last year. But that's why we had such substantial new growth, was that in the MCI over on Northside Road. The state actually values that facility. So that's telephone. They do the telephone and the gas companies, and the DOR values that for the whole state. And then they tell you what those assessments are. They hired Sanssouci, the same company that we hired to value Millennium, and worked with us on the solar, and it ended up being that $70 million valuation that we really lucked out on at the MCI property on Northside Road.
Mhm.
So those two windfalls really helped our new growth last year, which does change the levy, which is a good thing, but we're not going to see that new growth again, because with Amazon, if they have something there by July 1st, so, but to answer your question, so Amazon per the TIF will be a third-party assessment. Okay, and then Overlook, that's it.
Okay. That makes sense.
And hopefully Overlook, I can make it so that maybe it's every 5 years and not every year.
Yeah.
I'm working on that.
Anything else jump out at you that you want to mention on your budget? Or does anybody here have a question on a particular item? Kind of walk us through the high points. Everybody good?
Good.
You all good?
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You get from recreation. There we go.
Kind of hard to get back there, so sorry.
Introduce yourself to everybody.
I'm Diane Doherty, Charlton Recreation.
All right. Yeah, we've got a copy of your budget if you'd like to walk us through. Any high points?
Okay, the only thing, we're not asking for any more money, but we're just asking for line item change. We'd like to take, in the past few years, we've been working without a recreational assistant. Started after our previous secretary, Sue Gelb, left. She wasn't replaced at that time, and that was right when COVID hit and everything kind of stopped. So we approached HR and they said kind of put a hold on it. I think working with Andrew too, we weren't able to fill the position because basically it fell on my shoulders. So I've been doing all the clerical parts of it. And our budget is really dwindling right now. We're kind of nervous. We'll probably end up with $400 left June 30th. We're paying for porta potties. That's our biggest expense for the fields. And so if we could, in the future, if we could change that, if we're not gonna replace the recreational assistant, if we could take that $1,900, well, I think the one that's proposed is, and create our budget to $8,300 for our expenses, that would help us out greatly. That would give us a little bit more leeway to maybe do some work on the fields and things like that. So it's just,
Sorry, I didn't follow you there. You want to move, you want to.
It's moved on your budget, so they used to have a
Oh, it's
line.
all, oh, you are.
Yep,
Yeah,
so there
we're
used to be a
moving.
line for there's like a 2 hour
assistant.
per week clerical person.
right, 2
And then
hours.
so they took that money and put it into their expense account.
Would just like to put it in, down the road, if, you know, if we can, get back on track and maybe get a recreational assistance to help us, but it's basically taking minutes and doing paperwork, and copies and paying bills and things like that, and I've been pretty much maintaining it for the time being, for the last few years, so.
Got a lot of porta potties out there.
I'm sorry, what?
You got a lot of porta potties out there. Huh?
Well, we do. We have, actually, we had 6 last year, but right now we're affording 4. 2 over behind the town hall and 2 down by Maynard Field. And both of them have to be ADA compliant. So they're a little bit more expensive. But last year, the increased cost was, with COVID, Board of Health was asking that they be cleaned twice a week rather than once a week
Mhm.
and be documented. So with that extra cleaning expense, we kind of had a lot of money spent that way. But this year, I'm happy to say they're only asking us to do it once a week.
Mhm.
And we cut down 2 from football. We're gonna ask football to, if when they have their big events, if they would spring for 2 extra porta potties at that time, because they're flexible schedule, but, so we got 4 out there right now.
Right, let them pick up the
Yeah.
overflow.
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
fun.
Yeah.
Okay. And, all right, and you still got your old home day expenses.
Those are other expenses that, we just carry forward every year, and an Old Home Day has their own committee that comes and, you know, advocates for that, but I guess it's included as part of our budget.
That's what you always have to- Any questions of Diane? Simple concerns, everybody happy? That was easy, huh?
Well, I had one question.
Oh. Should have asked you if you had questions of us. I'm sorry.
And since we're gonna be out of money pretty soon, is there any way to transfer the existing, for this year's physical budget, to transfer that secretarial position money into our expense account somehow, some way, before June 30th?
No,
I can only do it in May and June. Unless it needs to go to, otherwise it has to go to town meeting first. But
Yeah,
just-
that's what we wouldn't be able to dig into that money at all.
no.
Yeah, legally, I can always, only town meeting can do it, or I can, with the board of selectmen and FinCom approval, I can do it in May and June. That's mass.
May and
general law.
June, so we could possibly ask for it May and June.
Yeah, so if it's before May, I can put it on the town meeting warrant to move it, and town meeting can approve it, otherwise, if it's after that, then the FinCom and the board of selectmen would have to authorize it.
Okay, just we're getting down to, I figured out how much it was gonna cost, and like I said, if anything comes up now, we've got $400 left, so it's cutting it pretty close. So that's why I was wondering if we could dig into that money somehow, since it's already
Actually
approved.
get you the right paperwork.
Yeah,
to
so
fill
if
out.
you want to put it on the town meeting warrant, we can add it to the warrant, just shoot me an email, otherwise I can't, I can only do it in
The
May and
town
June.
meeting warrant, but that's where this is gonna be approved anyway.
So I can do it, I'd have to do a FY 22 like budget transfer, and they'd authorize and approve it for 22. Otherwise, I can only do it in May and June with the board and
Oh, well, we can
FinCom's
talk
approval.
about
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you,
Okay,
thank you.
oh, thanks for coming, Dave. All right. Well, water and sewer are not coming today, so that just leaves the schools, right? And I don't see anybody from the schools here yet. Of course, we didn't say that they were coming till 7:45, so I mean, this is what happens when you get really ahead of schedule, okay? They don't figure they gotta come yet.
You want to talk about budget?
Yeah, yeah,
Since we're-
since we have 45 minutes.
Yeah, might as well.
We got some time.
I don't have it in front of me, but I mean, I pretty much know what's in it.
You wanna come?
Yeah. We've been looking at it for the past
Yeah.
3
Mine
months.
actually.
No, I don't have like the expense budget. So I don't know if you all read the little memo I put together about the changes that we made for like the new ad, so police asked for 4 people, town clerk asked for a part-time. Yeah, if you want to, but yeah, town clerk asked for a part-time, COA asked for a part-time, fire asked for a part-time. Then we had the floater in there, so I left 2 police officers, because he asked for 2 police officers, a dispatch and a lieutenant. So I left the 2 officers in the budget. And then I left the part-time people in COA and town clerk and the part-time person in fire. But that was before we got the school's budget. So I don't know
Right, so,
how everyone's feeling about adding.
so yeah, you're basically saying you're still 300 short. with the
We are
new
now,
school.
yes, yeah.
With the new
yeah.
school.
That's if we want to bump it up to, I mean, we're still bound by Dudley, even if we were to approve the higher budget, we're still bound by whatever Dudley comes up with, so we don't, it's just how it works.
Yeah, no, the biggest question I had, I thought that the chief made a pretty good case for another dispatcher. right?
So
And
that's what
was
I
a little
thought too, and I had
sad
given,
to see that one cut.
so I had given him a dispatcher and an officer. And then he came to Andrew and I said, well, no, I'm gonna change my order, I don't really have a need for a dispatcher, excuse me. I'm losing my voice.
Yeah.
I don't have a need for a dispatcher if I don't have 2 police officers. So he wanted the 2 police officers first, then a dispatcher, then a lieutenant. So that's the order he
Okay, so
wanted.
he changed the priority then,
Correct,
since
yes.
he met with us.
Correct. So I asked him, I said, I'm gonna give you 2. What do you want? Do you want a dispatcher and a police officer? Do you want to, I said, I just cut the lieutenant out. So you're either getting a dispatcher or 2 police officers, you choose.
Yeah.
And he said he wanted the 2 police officers, so.
Okay,
I don't know how, I had done a little quick estimate before, we came in, so we're about 300 short. I can find about another 200 in revenues, just that we had, because I cut, because we didn't need it, so I can find about another 200,000 in revenues. Mostly I cut back motor vehicle, which we're always high on anyway. So I can add
What
another.
do you mean you cut?
So when we balance, I play around with local receipts to balance, so I can cut from there, because that's like your motor vehicle, your meals tax, your cannabis tax. So I can play around with that number just to balance.
Mhm.
And then obviously anything that we get above that, whatever we put forward for the recap is free cash.
Mhm.
So I can play around with that number a little bit. I have about 200,000 I feel comfortable moving up with. So that would leave us with $100,000 deficit if we go up to the higher school number.
Mhm.
So the cost of 2 police officers, about 100 and 56,800. The cost of the town clerk, extra part-time person is 14,700. The council on aging person's 14,000, and then the fire admin's 24,800. So if I cut all of the, that we didn't add any new positions at all, it'd be a $210,000 savings.
Mhm.
So I'd have the extra money there. Plus, I'd obviously cut back on health insurance.
Thanks.
If I kept one police officer and cut everything else, I'd be about $131,000, so we balance at that point also. If I kept both police officers and cut all the other positions, I would still need about another 50,000 from somewhere.
Mhm.
So, we did put in a $200,000 into stabilization. So I could also cut that, then we could just fund it in the fall of free cash. So I have a couple different scenarios. If you want to leave all the new people, I could just cut the stabilization funding and then we balance. If you
You're
want,
saying cut the stabilization to make up the 50?
so I could cut, so we're putting 200,000 into stabilization, so I could just cut that and I would only need another 100,000 in local receipts.
Oh,
If I
without,
cut that
I
completely,
got
yeah.
you.
So if you want to keep the both police officers and cut all the other part-time, I would need another 50,000, so I could just cut, I could do 150 into stabilization instead of the 2, and then that could be my 50. Otherwise, we're looking into into cutting like expense budgets out of, because obviously everyone inflated them because of inflation, so like I know fire added extra, like police added, just because of the inflation of contracts, everything's going up. So I know everyone added a little bit of inflation, so that I start cutting at that point. So, and then I also added, library wanted 40,000 for building repairs. I cut it in half and gave them 20. So I gave them another 10,000 from where they are this year. So,
Okay.
but every other, I haven't cut anyone else's expense budget at all. I've left everyone that's asked for money, I've left.
Yeah.
I just
But
was,
all the different departments that ask for 16 hours here and
right.
14 hours there, that's pretty much gone.
Well, they're in right now, but that leaves us with a $300,000 deficit.
Right, okay.
So
Right.
the one that you have that has, this is page 14 on the bottom, just outlines the requests that both have been included in the budget currently, and then the ones that were requested at some point in time, but were not included.
Requested,
So
It's
this-
up top.
yeah, so the ones that were requested and that are in the budget,
Yeah.
the town clerk department assistant, the additional 6 hours for conservation, the increase in police custodial hours, the 2 police officers, council on aging and activities assistant, and then the part-time fire department admin, those are included in this budget that you guys have. The facilities manager, the additional police lieutenant, additional dispatcher, a police dispatcher, and the community risk reduction, the mobile integrated healthcare position at the fire department were not included.
gotcha. Okay.
Was that at their request? The fire one?
The fire one was requested.
None of the cuts are their request at all.
So the,
Well,
Maybe.
if the police were deferred. Because you said I'll give you 2, and he said, okay, I choose
2
those
police
2.
officers, right?
But fire,
So
we elected to.
So Andrew and I talked about it, there's like a $60,000 fee with the state that we have to pay if we try to initiate that program. And I just don't see paying 60 grand towards a program that we're gonna be a guinea pig for. Cause there's no one else in the state that does it at the moment.
So I think what they're doing is they're
Gotcha.
working with UMass to try to figure out what this type of program would look like. And we just want to have them have that program in place and saying this is what it would look like and what we need to do. And then come back and say, all right, it requires us to dedicate an additional body to it and fund it at that time versus saying, yeah, we're just gonna throw another body there and hopefully the program moves forward.
Yeah, and we also hope that at that point, they'd either cut the fee at the state level or there'd be maybe grants towards it to
Yeah.
initiate the program,
Makes sense.
so.
Wow. they're gonna charge us $60,000.
Yeah, it was like it was like less, it was either 30 or 60, I can't remember, but it was still, wait, like, if it was a couple thousand, okay, fine, but
Yeah,
I'd like to see a cost benefit analysis of the program at the end of the day, right?
Right.
Like
yeah,
investing 120 or whatever it is.
right.
Yeah.
Reduces.
the problem, Christian, is if we're the guinea pigs, there is no.
There-
cost to come
yeah,
in and
yeah,
say
no,
that
that's
This has
fair.
ever worked
Yeah,
before.
and I,
Yeah.
like Angela, I'd rather see like this is what the person would do rather than just fund the person and have them be like, okay, what am I doing today? Because they don't really have a plan in place yet, so.
Yeah, good.
I just didn't know where you guys were leading for doing the school, so.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we also now have the Shepherd Hill renovations was approved. So I don't know if you guys heard that. Was approved with the state at the beginning of March, first week.
Yeah, so that's gonna be a long, I'd say, ask them some questions about that,
Yeah.
but they have a very long timeline they have to fulfill to meet the MSBA program requirements. It's definitely not a full fund year one.
Right.
But it would start, I believe, with a feasibility study that the towns would have to vote to fund.
Mhm.
Not sure if that cost is reimbursable.
Yeah.
So
Everything
that
is
would be
out of our
official.
pocket first.
Yeah, and then, so yeah, I just didn't know. That's kind of where we are now.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
obviously the school is new, so.
You had mentioned earlier that Andrew had made some changes to the COVID funds for the.
Yeah, to the
What's the
ARPA,
acronym?
You- from the original plan, I think we had given FinCom, I think we.
Yeah, it
changed
was
a little
scaled
bit.
back significantly from the very first plan that we had. We kept in the radio program. I believe that the first plan that you guys had seen may have had like an economic development coordinator in it, but that was not included. Instead, we dedicated $200,000 toward small business grant fund program, which is rolled out. It was about we took $300,000 to offset general fund revenues from last year. So seeing as we met for this year. So seeing that we're projecting to meet our budgetary goals, that'll just roll back into free cash next year. I think what else we had in that? It was 50,000 just dedicated for kind of administration and auditing costs.
Give 100,000 towards some IT upgrades,
Yeah.
or like 80,000.
I have to double check that.
Senior centers.
We had 75 for a study on the senior center, figure out the long-term solution for them. And then I believe another 100,000 just to offset any unforeseen COVID impacts, whether that be police, fire, Board of Health, any costs that they might have from new variants that come up.
So
So
cost of testing and all.
Yeah. yeah, so I believe that was everything that we kind of limited it down to. So we were still.
Could you send us the updated?
Yes, yeah, I have it actually out online right now for the public to.
Oh, is it?
to view.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I can
Because I
check
think
that.
actually a little, right when you go on the homepage, I think there's an ARPA
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
There's an ARPA button.
Mhm. What other highlights should we be thinking about?
I'm trying to think, we did switch the police custodians, because right now the
Yeah, I
person
saw
had
that. All of a sudden it
retired.
was zero, but then I saw down below.
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
another line
So
item.
we're trying to find the right approach for that. Whether that be, because right now we have it budgeted for 15 hours per week, and we've advertised 3-4 times for the position, and we haven't had a single applicant. So
Well, we have.
we've had the library custodian able to dedicate a few hours per week to go over there and at least keep things going, but the library's basically asked that beginning in April to kind of ask her to rededicate her time back to the library solely. We've gotten price quotes on going to a contracted service, and essentially for 15 hours a week, it was the equivalent to having a dedicated staff person there for 25 hours a week. So we're looking at budgeting for that quoted amount, but trying to backfill it at a higher number of hours and try at probably at hopefully the 25 hours a week. And then finding somebody that may be interested in more part-time work, but maybe wasn't interested at 15.
Yeah.
I know we had at least kind of kicked the tires a little bit about making it a full-time position and having it truly kind of integrated with the other with the other buildings, that they could truly cover one another. But not at this time. I think that long term, if we look at some sort of facilities division, then another full-time position might make sense. But where we are budgetarily, I think that just keeping it part-time but increasing the hours is probably the right way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the
pretty
only
much-
changes that, oh, yeah, the clerical,
Yeah.
so clerical did dissolve as of February 7th or somewhere
Mm-hmm.
on there. So all of the putting them on the pay plan costs are in the budget, and we did a 2% COLA for everybody, so that's reflected in here as well.
Okay.
So that's, everyone's salaries are up to date.
It throws it off a little bit is that when the clerical union was established, everybody was at a singular rate for their class. So it didn't matter if you were here for a day or 20 years, you're paid the same rate. So when they were integrated into the non-union pay plan, it's our more tenured employees saw larger increases. So that may be something that comes up in review with seeing larger increases for administrative staff or for the people that have been here for at least, I think any more than 7+ years saw some larger jumps.
I think there's about 4 that saw probably the biggest increase, and then the rest of them are all kind of scattered around each other.
That couldn't be phased in over a 2 or 3 year time frame and say, look, you get a 10%. I don't know if they were as high as a 10% or 8%.
I
or
think
whatever.
I think the highest was a little over $2 an hour. So it's not huge, but I mean, it is a
Yeah.
difference from. So I think the highest is even if it was $3, like it wasn't higher than that. So I don't know, like percentage wise, but
Mhm,
I mean, it's not, I don't think we're talking huge, maybe 50 grand
mhm.
for the whole year extra, if that.
Okay.
So it's
It
not
was-
huge, but
It was an expenditure that we had actually budgeted
Right.
into our contractual obligations line
for this
for
year.
whenever they dissolved, but it wasn't retroactive to the beginning of the year. So it was at the point that the contract was officially dissolved by the state.
Mhm. Okay,
So it's the beginning of February.
Yeah.
So.
right. It seems I had last year's revenue. budget.
So our revenue budget does tie, I'll make sure I put the right one in there. But it does
But-
tie currently to the 34,586,261.
Okay.
So then obviously with the school, we're $300,000, but the expense budget will be $300,000 more,
Okay.
so.
But my question was really gonna be, was there any significant change on that revenue budget that?
No, everything's pretty much, we have like a 2% increase, or 2.5%, which is pretty much just your prop 2.5. like
Yeah, and I think we were pretty conservative with our local receipts
Budgeting anyway.
so far. So we're not projecting out for large projects or anything like that. We're trying to assume this is a very, very standard year.
Yeah, our new growth, I think I kept at 300,000.
Yeah.
Kathy and I had talked. So it doesn't include Amazon, doesn't include LNG, nothing. We didn't, that's just strictly what she's forecasting as just new growth for housing, and
Yeah.
so that doesn't include any of the big projects coming up. So obviously anything that's extra will be more.
I'm assuming, Bill, that that's the way you guys want to view it too. We don't touch, we don't think about money we don't have.
In my opinion, absolutely, until we actually, until it actually hits the books,
Right.
I'm pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And that's the way,
Okay.
Andrew and I were talking with Kathy as well, so we didn't,
And will we have
Yeah.
a fall town meeting so that if we do have additional growth, we can
Right.
use it then?
like we did this year, we can throw into stabilization to try to get closer to our 10%.
Yeah.
We don't really want to close it to excess levy capacity, because then it hurts us for the following year, but.
Yeah, the 200,000 that we have earmarked for stabilization, that essentially keeps us at that 8%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of our total, so we're doing better than we were a few years ago.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if we do see, the permit, the large permit fee that we're anticipating to see, that could be a significant contribution that we could target for that as well.
I think the danger is just the proverbial counting the chickens before they hatch.
Right.
In that it's easy to spend money you don't have.
Right.
So I didn't increase anything for building permits and everything was, I left all that out of everything. So I had nothing for Amazon, nothing for LNG, nothing for the other. So we just
No,
kept
that's good.
everything like we are now.
Yeah.
Just in case something were to happen.
Yeah, and the thing is if Amazon even becomes 5% completed, that's gonna impact new growth substantially.
Right,
I think that would give us 100,000 right there, but we
Yeah.
don't know, it's crystal ball still right now.
Right.
We don't know if by June 30th they go, so the fall town meeting, we may have more.
So,
Mhm.
And that's where I think we probably all have to have a big discussion about what we want to do with that excess revenue. Because I know there's, just for me, there's still that fire station problem we have. And, plus, as Ashley mentioned, all the school stuff, the feasibility study and the probable
the roofs.
vote. Yeah, as well as the roofs, which I know that we need to talk about as well. So to me, I've asked Anthony to be incredibly conservative. And we're gonna, along with FinCom, have a much larger discussion later on about what we want to do with net new revenue.
So if I remember correctly, we are either at like 2.5 or 2.9 increase in the revenue budget from prior year. So it's not much over what your Prop 2.5 is, which is the one that's allowed by.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were super conservative, kept everything pretty much where we were last year, so. Try not to count.
So we don't have to use the term level budget to level funded.
No,
We like to use the term level service.
yeah.
Level service.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, I'll write that down. So
All right.
Add the lexicon from now on.
Yeah.
Okay. Level service.
that last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we tried to hear everyone out for what they asked for, but obviously, we can only do so much, so.
Okay. How much of the budget that you've proposed have you talked over with some of the departments that?
So all the departments have a copy of the last column, the 3-2 column.
Yeah.
Everyone has their budgets
Okay,
so far, so.
so they're all aware of if they're not getting what they specifically.
Correct, yeah.
No surprises to anybody. Okay.
Not that I've heard.
No, nothing that's whacked anybody over the head.
Okay. You haven't had them storming the gates, right?
No, especially not budgetary.
Because from what I saw, it looked pretty good.
The only person who did
Except
say
for the
something to me
police,
was
I was a
library.
little misunderstood
Yeah.
about the.
Library did want to know if she could come forth and ask for more. I just told her to be happy with what she got, so. So,
You gotta
I
put
think
that
the
in the
only
memos.
thing, would,
Yeah.
I would say the only kind of conversation on budget I've or continual conversation around budget I've had is with police advocating for the dispatcher.
yeah, he wants 3.
We wanted to go to another dispatcher, has asked if there's any way of phasing it in later on in the year. It's kind of the discussion has been, if I give you 2 bodies, what are those 2 bodies gonna be? And police officers been right that, so. That's been the one, again, I say out of the ones that weren't proposed, that's been kind of the one that's been brought up the most.
And now mind you too, that the 3 part-time people that we have, so the town clerk, council on aging and fire are all in there still.
Mhm.
So they're,
Yeah.
that we haven't cut them. So,
In the sheet, I included estimated benefit costs. So some of them, if they're staying under the 19 hours per week, there wouldn't be any additional benefit costs. If it's a position that's estimated for more than 19 hours per week or pushes their hours over that, I estimated at a full family plan impact in the health insurance line.
and that's what I did for budget too. So any cut of a full-time person would also cut money out of the insurance budget as well, so. We always budget for the high just because you don't know who you're hiring, so.
Right, has everybody here had a chance to look at the new accounting software that Andrew has got installed? Andrew and Ashley are working on and get your username and your login. Any first thoughts on?
I think it's awesome.
Huh?
It's awesome.
Yeah, I like the fact that we can see the average price of a home in the town of Charlton. We see the population. It's a lot more
Yeah.
robust than I thought it was just gonna be an Excel spreadsheet. Fancy. Okay.
And this is kind of a printed off version of what, you know, I can give you guys, but I only printed off one because it's like 56 pages and it's not completely done. So, but, you know, you can kind of see it has some of the same stuff where I just had the pay plan in here, but then like you can see my smiling face on here and an actual description of the budget and then an outline of, you know, our historical trends over time in between salaries. You know, I kind of try to group some similar departments together. So that way it was, you know, like the land use division, you know, as the finance division as another. So you kind of saw the trends of how we funded different departments within a division over time. So
You're going to be able to send, say, a PDF or something to the departments. They'll fill it out and then it will automatically incorporate.
Yeah, so what would happen is, so I usually send out budget spreadsheets in October. So what they would do is I'd go in and they'd get a notification to go into ClearGov and they'd have till December 31st to fill out online, whatever they're asking for. If they're increasing, or if they're keeping a level funded budget, they just push everything through. And then that will come over and it will automatically populate until the big expense spreadsheet that you have.
Yeah.
So it'll automatically populate into there. And as I make changes, it notifies them.
Mhm.
And then we can, I believe we can plug in, so if we're gonna give COLAs, the cost of living, so if you're gonna do like a 2%, I can plug in a 2% to all the personnel and it will automatically increase their
Because
salary
it's
and
going
it
to
will fund in the
classify
budget.
Who's eligible, who's not eligible. and the
Yeah.
rest of it.
Yeah, so we have it all separate, all the union employees are separate and all the non-union, and then the three contractual employees that we have. So the Andrew, the fire chief and the
Yeah.
police chief. So they're all separate in there, so whatever adjustments they're getting, we can plug in for each different.
So we're gonna start with this fiscal year.
we're kind of starting it in beta this year.
Right.
Where it's just Ashley and I that are kind of pulling the strings on the back end of this and plugging stuff in, but next year, as we're going to the summer, hopefully kind of train people, get them more familiar with the program, and then when we get to November, it's going to be, here's your budget, log in, start putting your numbers in, and it starts with them and pulls right into the budget, but we just have to plug in the revenue figures and then balance from there.
But I was just wondering if there's no way to upload old Excel spreadsheets to go back in a history.
They're already
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, the only
Oh,
thing
they
that's
haven't
not
been-
in
I
there
guess
is the
that's
FY
right.
22 revenue budget, because it's the timing for revenue posting, we don't usually post the revenue budget until we do the tax recap. So it's just delayed,
It's
so,
estimate, it just shows estimated revenue.
right, so the expense budget will always be in there, but the revenue budget would be like a delay, so we'll have to put like an estimated one in there, but right now, I think if you were to log into Quibb, I don't know if it's live, but the $300,000 deficit is in there. We have it, so the revenue budget is in there, the full expense budget with the
Because you put
school.
the new school budget in
Yeah,
there.
Andrew
with
did it
the
last
middle
week, yeah.
number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when they approved it, he went
Yeah.
and added it last week,
Okay.
so.
I know some of the line items were in at a rolled up level.
Yeah,
Are we going back and
If
putting
you-
putting them down in the details?
if you
or-
drop like the arrows down, it will unroll it all for you.
No, it was like the category line was $350,000, but everything that made up for underneath was at zeros for prior years.
Under revenue?
I think revenue was.
Oh,
Okay,
so
yeah,
that could be why.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know the prior years that we had uploaded, it was very detailed as far as what everything it was. In FY 22, we just used a general blanket number of what we
Right.
took off of our worksheet
Yeah,
to give a
'cause-
baseline.
The prior years was actual, so I could take just like our data dump from our accounting software. Whereas I don't have actuals yet for 22, so it's just whatever we estimated for budget wise, so just like the generic. So like 22 million in for property tax and whatever we estimated on the
Mhm.
revenue budget that went to town meeting is kind of thrown in there for now. That's the only downside with the revenue, it's just finicky because it's timing.
Mhm.
But the actuals, like the actual revenues that we got in for like 21, 19, 20, those are all in there.
Mhm.
so. And then like the expenditure budget for
Will it,
22.
will it show an ongoing, throughout the course of the year, what each department has spent?
Not spent, no, because that's a different, that's, their accounting.
Yeah.
There's a way that you could do continual uploads, but I think that might be a little bit of a.
Yeah, I think it's hard enough for us to
Administrative
get
nightmare.
reports now.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I try to
you've
send
already
reports.
solved a lot of her problems, Ashley's problems of uploading this.
Yeah, it's actually a lot easier. I can just go in and look at everything, so
Right.
it's just learning, obviously, is the learning curve, but once we're in it more, it's easier.
And who has access to this?
So right now, Ashley and I have kind of like the administrative access that can go in and see all the line items. We can assign specific portions of budget to the departments that manage it. So that way they're just looking at the lines that they're looking at. And then to the finance committee, sent you guys as reviewers, so that way you guys are aware of where our changes are. When we finalize or create a final budget, then I can make that completely public and everybody be able to view that.
Viewable, not editable.
Right,
Viewable,
yes.
yes,
Viewable.
like from a completely different
Yeah.
web page format and everything.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is nice.
So you see that, like the booklet that I printed out, it actually is formatted out to a web page version where each one of the tabs are like different web pages that you could go to and see a page about documentation of every single department. Try to add department descriptions and an explanation as to what changed from the prior year.
Excellent. I'll have to spend more time on it.
That's kind of where, that's just where we stand for now, so.
Yeah. Good. Want to check outside? I don't know whether Bay Path is here or waiting for us.
Saw
or-
Kenny rolling around for Shepherd Hill, but I didn't see anybody from Bay Path, like Clifford.
We did it be Kyle and Irene or,
Yeah.
Who else would come? We did tell him tonight, was that night, right?
No one in the hallway at all.
Yeah, it's over 7:45, it's an hour.
Well,
It's
Oh, wait, hold on, no, it's 6.
That, yeah, that hasn't changed.
I can't wait till they pass that law.
So see, our custodian's out, so he usually goes around, and changes up the clock, he's out. So no one's been changing clocks, so I did the same thing. in
I've
our
been
office,
in,
right?
yeah, we have.
All right, before I leave tonight, I'm gonna change.
Can you come change mine too?
I'm sitting there going like, how do we
Yes,
put these,
yes.
put that all the way at 7:40, how are you only 6:45 right now?
What's that?
It's odd for the school not to be here.
Yeah, I know, it's weird.
That's kind of odd. They definitely knew it was tonight.
Yeah, they had confirmed.
We even talked to Rich yesterday, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, well, Bay Path, Dudley's after Bay Path,
Right.
so,
But Hank, like you said, I think the big discussion is gonna be between the schools and us to figure out.
yeah, Bay Path's usually just whatever, like, what we can't negotiate them, because it's what we have to pay, we don't have a choice.
Right. No, that's an easy one, and, yeah, it's more of an informational.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
so,
Yeah,
yeah, maybe something conflicted or something,
Yeah, they're always on time.
yeah, maybe, I don't know,
I don't know.
I didn't hear back, so. It's Dudley, you know.
And then, I'll tell you what, right now, so you printed out this senior center budget,
Oh, yeah.
what would happen if?
So that was,
Okay.
yeah, that was
That
requested.
came out of the selectmen's meeting, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, so they wanted to know, budgetary impact, if we had to take the operational cost of a new senior center and the debt service that would be required to pay over a 10-year bond, for a 10 and 20-year bond, what that impact would be to operations to find that money. And we just used basically the budget that was approved at that annual town meeting, knowing that we were using our known 2.5 levy, not including any amendments that were made at the special town meeting. So I believe it was at 570,000 in additional expenditures that would have to be offset. Kind of in doing long-term budgeting forecasts, you don't necessarily look back and see what needs to be cut, but it's an exercise to kind of show the scale in which that debt service would and operational cost could impact.
The numbers are numbers, it doesn't matter what the project, okay? So if anybody else were to approach you and say, hey, I want to do this, this works. You know, as an example, just change the name at the top.
There was a prelim pushback by the Board of Selectmen on any type of debt exclusion. Obviously, that is not formal, but just speaking to myself, like unless it's an emergency or Shepherd Hill, I'm not voting to put anything on the ballot for debt exclusion right now. So that's one of the reasons why we asked Andrew to come up with a kind of a pro forma, hey, if you want something, this is what you're gonna have to cut. Now, again, who knows what's gonna happen longer term, if other selectmen agree, that's a different conversation.
No, I had nothing to do one night, so I did watch that selectmen's. meeting.
We had nothing better to do.
I had nothing to do, so I showed up.
And I thought it was interesting. It's ironic, if you saw our agenda, which I know you did, though, you see that Frank Morel and Dan Crowdy are coming tonight. Right? And want to talk to us about the same thing.
I'm looking forward to it.
And I offered him the opportunity, because in case you didn't know, Dan was the one that nominated me for this committee,
Oh, was it really?
and Frank was the chairman at that time.
Nice.
So you can't say no to cover.
I think it's a good discussion. Just, nice stuff, just how we pick.
Right, no, they got some ideas, I guess.
So what?
No, you're gonna give anybody credit for trying. The worst that can happen is Andrew comes up with another one of these, okay, and says it don't work.
Pretty soon we're just gonna be bare bones. If it keeps going. No, I'm just kidding.
Happens.
Yeah, this is,
I think you just took.
so what was it, if you didn't watch that meeting?
Yeah,
Basically,
basically,
newest
yeah.
positions. that were
Council on
filled,
Aging
that
came and
work
said,
backwards.
hey, we could buy the old child furniture building.
Yeah.
And here's what it would take. And so Andrew came up and basically said, all right, it'll take this much to buy it, this much to refurbish it. And this is the positions you have to cut, policemen, firemen. Okay.
Yeah, that was just strictly using like our FY 22 budget. If nothing else changed over the course of 20 years, if this was only our budget.
How,
This is how we would fund it
how
within
it
the
would
budget.
work in our operating budget,
Right.
not if we went over and above and
Right.
got some standard exclusion or something.
The assumption was around a $2 million purchase price, approximately $2 million enhancements, and then additional, Andrew, I can't remember what you baked in for like an additional operating costs.
Yeah.
Services and so on.
I estimated 70,000 for additional operating costs between utilities, custodial, general maintenance. It's just as a shot in the dark, we don't know what the electricity bills are, or, if there would be a one. Pick your utility fee, but just kind of using a blanket number.
No, and I applaud anybody that wants to try, and I'm for a nice building. I just personally, I would have a hard time with a nice senior center and a fire department that's turning mold into our.
Is that one building?
Just for the record, DCRSD is here early, unlike Bay Path who's late. Just gonna throw it out there.
Thank you, Bill.
We can let them go on.
I will let see the floor.
Yeah, no, we'll switch it around if they're here.
Good job, Andy.
Come on up, guys. You're gonna actually step ahead of Bay Path on this one, okay?
No, it's only at your table, right?
Exactly.
Hello.
6, 7, right?
Thank you. How you doing?
I think I got enough there.
See, it's a short one. Had a feeling.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I was like, he goes, why did you just think on the same week we had the school? And I was like, I didn't know it at the time.
It's okay, sleep is school week.
All right, if you guys would like to introduce yourself to the committee.
Sure.
My name is Stephen Marsh, Superintendent for the Dudley Charlton Regional School District.
I'm Kenny LaFerriere, elected member of the school committee. I'm also chair of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee.
Rich Matthew, Director of Finance and Operations for the district.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, walk us through what you got. What did you just hand us here?
Okay, so we presented a couple times to school committee. So what I chose to do is to give you a smaller version of that presentation
Thank you.
to really get to a slimmed down version, to try to get to some of the, some of the meat and some of the things that I think are important to discuss. So I'll walk through that a little bit. And then obviously, Mr. Matthew will speak as well, and Mr. LaFerriere will contribute to the presentation too, okay?
Thank you, Steve.
Yep. So just and you do have page numbers, you have 2 slides per page. I was trying to save on paper. So I just wanted to touch real quick about the fixed costs, because we all deal with fixed costs within our the way I look at Dudley Charlton is a third municipality, within the region here. You have Dudley, you have Charlton, you have Dudley Charlton Regional School District. So we have fixed costs as well, just like municipalities do. And so when we started this, we identified fixed costs in the increase, and this is at the beginning of the month. This doesn't account for right now in time. Hopefully some things will change a little bit, but we do have some commitments on utilities right now to only have a 5% increase for our utilities going to the next school year. Our health insurance, when we started this, was a 6% increase. We've now adjusted it. It's a 1% increase for health insurance since next year, which I think is phenomenal.
Congratulations.
And that will certainly help with the finances. Worcester County retirement for us is a 9.96, or in essence, a 10% increase contribution to Worcester County retirement for us as a district.
Just out of curiosity, quick question, do you have an unfunded liability with them?
With Worcester County retirement?
Yes,
You do?
as do all the municipalities.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to them.
Oh, I have no idea off the top of my head.
I might-
Funded
I
at
might-
like
it's-
64%.
Huh?
I think they're funded at like 64% of their liability.
Yeah, we're on the same schedule as all of the members of the Worcester Regional Retirement, and I believe it's 2040 that the goal was originally for full funding. I think that's been pushed out to 2050.
Yeah, that I'm not.
Similar to ours, Ashley,
Yeah, I don't think our number, it's the same number of years. I think it's still 40. Is it still 40 year? Because our payment hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
at least not this year. We got a report, so.
just I know that that's a number that can come and bite you at some time, and I just like to know what it is.
Right, so this increase is specific to retirees within the Worcester County retirement system for us as a district. We have student services increases, as you know, with the interrupted learning we've had over the years. We have substantial increases in supporting our students, students that may be struggling learners, maybe exhibiting or manifesting certain disabilities in an accentuated way, based off of being, what I would continue to classify as probably a lesson learned. Remote learning is not really the best model for teaching students. So we do have consequences from that. And so that it has increased our student services accounts within our district as well. And I know we've talked about that for a couple of years now, that we're seeing greater needs in our students, but the last 2 years have exacerbated that to a larger extent. We have an increase in our school choice and charter assessment, which is 20%. So it's a sizable increase for us. 20% looks like a lot, but it is to us in our budget. It's a little over $100,000 increase to our assessment for students that are choosing to go to a charter school or school choicing outside of our district. So that plays into our balancing our budget for our fiscal year. So our fixed costs are, after the adjustment with the health insurance, are let's call it $1.1 million in itself. That's just fixed costs. And that doesn't count the contractual obligations, which is the slide below it. So we have contractual obligations too, as you know, you do in the municipality too. So our contractual obligations are roughly $1 million. So before we even get past go, our budget increase for next fiscal year is $2 million, $2.1 million before we even get past go. So, I mean, that's a sizable increase to a budget, any budget, on our $52 million budget. So we know we have work to do. That's not, we can't just sit here and say, it's 2.2, thank you, thank you, and wait for the applause. It's just not how it works. So we did work on a budget that we, since this is my third year, we always work on concessions within that budget, because we know that just that fixed costs and the contractual obligations is not the goal line. We have to work on concessions to try to bring that cost down. We know that over the years, we've also had questions about enrollment. Enrollment has changed within our district. There's no question about that. So that is a factor in us trying to provide concessions to get into a balanced budget to present to you, so that we don't just take the 2.2 and move that forward. So right now, school committee did approve a 4.03% increased budget, which is that top page there. And in that, there are concessions in there. One of them is truly targeting class size of 22 across our district. So it's an average at the secondary level as you get to 7th and 8th grade and work your way through high school. It's an average class size of 22, but elementary, it's really targeting 22, which will be the first time since I've been here in 3 years that 22 is the actual target. We've always talked about 22 as being a target, but we've always had the luxury of having some wiggle room within that with some staff. So we are making some adjustments within this budget presentation in this budget to get to 4.03 to reduce some staff based off of enrollment. And it goes further as we decrease our budget. We still continue to try to address that. So through that, and the structure that is used here is the attrition. So when somebody retires, the district doesn't fill it, and that's a way of trying to save money. It doesn't always work because it could be a unique position that you're not filling or a unique program, but we're continuing that model now, and we're through attrition. We have a foreign language teacher retiring, a science teacher, and an elementary teacher, and we're not going to fill those positions. Elementary obviously is a little bit easier because we can target the class size of 22 and justify that. Foreign language and science, we have to work harder on our scheduling and student selection, course selection of our students to make sure that we're averaging around 22 to get there, and we believe we can do that. Beyond that, we're reducing 3 middle school teachers, again, targeting that class size average of 22. So that's just, those are basically 6 reductions. I know people don't like to talk about the attrition as a reduction, but it truly is a reduction in our budget. So those are 6 positions just to get the 4.03%, 6 full-time positions out of our district. And then on top of that, the out-of-district coordinator, which is somebody, almost every district has somebody for the student services for out-of-district support services. So those are students that have multiple disabilities and they attend out-of-school day programs or overnight programs. Those are very complicated. Those are very costly. That's a large portion of the budget. In most districts, and ours was one of them, usually has somebody who manages that outside. So you basically have an account manager or an out-of-district person. Usually it's a retiree, which we had. We had 2 retirees sharing the job. And they were managing our out-of-district placements for our students to ensure, fiduciary responsibility, program responsibility, just to make sure that everything was, the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. We're eliminating that position as well. So that's a savings of around $30,000, which inherently means that roles and responsibility falls on current staff in our building. But again, we know we need to work with you and work with our towns to try to come up with concessions to try to balance the budget the best we can. And then on top of that, we do have level funded supplies and materials. And I have to say, this is the 3rd year in a row we've level funded those. We have not increased our supplies or materials, our technology. We have not increased those in 3 years, just so that we're on the same page. So that brings us into an increase of $2,085,497 or 4.03%. And again, that's what school committee voted on at their last meeting. Now, in the presentation, I think in fairness to this presentation too, I think it's appropriate to talk about the next level budget, which would be an additional reduction within our district to get the 3.23% increase, because I know 4.03 is still a large ask. But I think in fairness to the communities, we need to talk about what getting the 3.23% would look like, which was originally 2.92%. So on the left-hand side, you saw our Eliminates New School Choice program. That was coming out of the gate, and I already at the last meeting, I presented that I think that was a very conservative view, and I think that we have, because it is a revenue source. It's not, if we bring in 5 more students, that's 5,000 per student. So there is some revenue there, and if class size is around 20 in one grade because of change in enrollment, we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. And if we can have support students who want to attend our schools, which we always have waiting lists, especially 7th through 8th grade. Why would we cut that off? So I think we were a little too, I'll take the full responsibility for it. I think it was a little too conservative on that, eliminating school choice. And the reason why is because we were concerned if we did had an ultra focus on 22, that we were possibly, if we had school choice kids in, which we own once we accept them, that if we bubble classes to 23, 24, 25, we're getting into a different category, and it would be concerning. And then school choice may be a target, and I wouldn't want to victimize somebody just because they school choice and we accepted them within our community. So I think it was a little conservative, but I think we can manage that a little bit better and try to accept some school choice students where there is room within our middle schools, okay? Because it is a revenue for our district as well. With the 3.23%, there are continued to be staffing reductions. I want to be clear, there were no additional staff. We're not asking for anything new in our staff this year. In the past, we've asked for it. We tried to develop concessions that would help offset asking for new. This year, it's all concessions. It's all concessions. There's no proposed new staff members in here. One of the things we did, and we received feedback between our budget presentation, so you're getting the kind of the final version of the presentation with the lines through it. One of the concerns was foreign language at the middle school, because we were recommending to eliminate that. That was a heavy lift and a big ask, and we did receive a lot of feedback that shouldn't occur. We need to do everything we possibly can to keep foreign language at the middle school level. And that includes, I had a meeting yesterday with my high school student group, 23 students, and they asked me the question about foreign language. Mr. Larcher, you still, is foreign language still going to be cut at the middle school? So it was brought up at that group as well, which I thought was fantastic. So right now, we're doing everything we can to put that back in the budget, which is why it's at 3.23%. It sounds counterintuitive to the thinking that we have on here, Shepherd Hill Regional High School French teacher. But working with the high school staff, we have enough foreign language staff to cover the interest that's in foreign language, again, at the class size of 22. And for those students who may be in a further track in French, we would do what we have done in the past. We would try to offer some type of an online course or some type of course for those students to continue within that particular French. But we do have foreign language teachers that can teach both French and Spanish. This is a teacher who's solely French within our district at this point in time. Okay. This also includes the reduction of a middle school librarian, which would leave us with 2 library assistants at the elementary level that is shared between 4 schools and 1 full-time librarian at the high school. Right now, there is only 1 middle school librarian who is shared between both schools. So they've already established some systems in place to be able to accommodate students who want to check out resources when the librarian's not there. So we think that we can, is it the best case scenario? No. But it is the recommendation that we have because we are getting so close to the actual classroom, as you see with reductions of classroom teachers within this particular proposal. We also have an additional elementary teacher. This would push that class to like 22.3. This is a fourth grade group at Dudley Elementary School. It would push it just slightly over 22, but it still keeps it within that range of 22 for us to try to get to this concession. And then we have a data specialist within our office, the district office. That position is actually vacated right now, and we've already moved to move that to a stipend position. So we're already predicting some cost savings there. But wherever we land with the budget, we'll see for next year. But this is another central office position, and I'll share with you in a second where we stand when it comes to district office operations for us financially. Okay, everyone with me so far? Okay. The next slide, this is something I think needs to be reiterated time and time again. When you look at our use of E&D, excess and deficiency, our ESSER grant that we received, I thought I left that slide in too. I did, so I'll go back to that. With our ESSER funds that we received, as communities received as well, and with our school choice money, that represents anywhere between, depending upon the final budget, anywhere between 10 to 6% of our budget. Meaning that those things could actually be budget busters. They could actually be fiscal cliffs for us. And the ESSER one is a great example of that. We received ESSER money, but it's not a lifetime of ESSER money. It's for us to try to spread out over time, and those actually pay for positions. So if I would respectfully ask you to go back to page 1, and the bottom of page 1, and look at the grants. So the ESSER, that's the COVID relief money that we received. As you as a community received as well. And this is currently what it's paying for. And you'll see that it's all around student services and student support. Paraprofessionals, school adjustment counselors, school nurse, postgraduate program for students 18 to 22, special education coordinator, clerical support for pupil personnel services, occupational therapist, director of public facilities, which we talked about last year. And that's becoming more and more important, especially being pulled into MSBA for eligibility now. We really need that role, and with our capital planning that we've been working on as well. And a reading specialist we're moving a reading specialist, which was in the operating budget, to this grant to try to help lower the cost for the operating budget as well. But we'll have to work on some reconfiguration of that. We did have
just so I understand, ESSER grants are COVID related. They're one-time shots.
Yes.
Okay. So whatever you do with that money, you're not going to be able to do.
Correct. We in actually less.
It'll last for fiscal 23 and 24.
Right. So we have a hard decision to either absorb it in our operating budget and make concessions to absorb it, or come and ask you for the additional million, which, you know,
That's where I'm kind of going with that one, Steve. I just want to know what's coming.
yes, yes. No, we know it's a fiscal cliff for us. We do. And the individuals who are in there know also that it's a, it will require hard thinking and hard decisions coming forward when the ESSER money runs out.
Yeah.
We do know that. And then 20% of that ESSER grant needs to be dedicated to address learning interruptions that happen during the COVID period as well. So that's what, you know, we are often asked what you are too, is what are you using your ESSER money, your COVID money for? And I just want to be clear, that's what it's being used for right now. So going back to page 6 on the bottom, looking at the 3.23%, you know, one of the things that we really wish we could do more with, and, you know, we are really going to ask the communities for some help, because this could help all of us. This could help you as a community, this could help us as a district, is around bus transportation. As a regional school, we are responsible for assigning a seat to every student in our district, whether they take the bus or not. So we run a full fleet for that reasons. Now, we do the best we can to try to manage that, but we know that with COVID, and we even know before COVID, we had a lot of parents that drove their kids to and from school every day. You know, my wife does it for our kids. It's just something she just wants to do. Yeah, occasionally I get the chance to do that too, which is a treat for me. But we know that people do that. But if we could have people actually opt out and say that I'm going to commit, and even if they couldn't, if there was that rare case, and Mr. Matthew and I talked about it, you know, even if we had one spare bus, if we were able to reduce 2 and have 1 spare that we didn't use on a regular basis for that, to accommodate those that may need it. But if people actually opted out from using the bus that aren't going to use it, we could actually save money. And it's about $60,000 a bus for us. But
Per
our
year.
start
60,000 per year,
per year.
per bus.
Yeah. But our starting point is we have to assign a seat to everybody. We don't have a choice on it. So if there was a way for us to try to, you know, that's why I put in here truth and service. If there was a way for us to get better to a truth and service and work collaboratively with our communities and our parents that drive their kids to and from school every day, there could be cost savings there that could help us and could help you as well through the financial structures that we have in place. So we are going to look at that as well. We're going to work on an opt-out program. It was tested 4 years ago.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe 5 years, but yeah, Charlton.
About 4 or 5 years ago at Charlton Middle School, but it was not successful. You were not able to.
We had about 10 families commit to it, and obviously that's not enough to reduce the full cost, unfortunately.
So we are going to take a look at that.
And I gotta believe they all better live in a similar area, because if it's one on the west side of town and one on the east side of town, it really.
There are a lot of miles to cover in Dudley and Charlton, and that certainly is one of the complexities involved here. That's that combined with the fact that we're trying to transport grades 12 through 5 in one tier and K through 4 in another, the numbers are just very unequal rather. So as a result, there's some inequity in, you know, and the larger number of students that we try to transport, grades 5 through 12, are the larger kids, so we can only seat them 2 per seat. So we're building the parking lot for the Friday after Thanksgiving, but the need for at the elementary tier is certainly less.
Thank you.
So as you can see, it's something we've not only discussed, we've been trying to plan, you know, schematically looking at it, but what we truly need is a commitment to opt out to make this work. And then down the road, you heard in our presentations, we were talking about some other future considerations, you know, whether it's regionalizing our middle schools, you know, we've talked about moving 8th grade to the high school, you know, those things are things that we have to look at to see if there's cost savings in that. We know there would be in transportation for some of those. So it is something that we continue to try to design out in some way to make it work, but it will require more detailed work. But a good starting point is people opting out from to and from if they possibly could. So on page, now I'm on page 8, and I'm going to the bottom of page 8 because I covered the top of it. So on your color copy, you can see kind of a green circle and a little bit of a blue outline on it. And this is how I presented this at school committee. And what this, in essence, is trying to show you is that, you know, Dudley Charlton is really, we don't have a lot of places to cut. You're seeing it cut. We're trying to match enrollment. We're trying to make cuts. But, you know, the places that we really have to cut going forward is going to be in the classroom. That's where the bulk of our finances goes. And the examples I give you is in the arrow, you can see for administrative costs, this is per pupil expenditure. There are 319 districts that report to DESE. for per pupil expenditures. There were 351 communities, but some are regional like us, so there are 319. Dudley Charlton is 319 out of 319 when it comes to administrative costs. That's our office running the district. We are 319 out of 319. We are the bottom. There's no place to go. And we're less $58 per student less than the next one up. So there's, so even cutting the district office data specialist, we're cutting into the 319. So that's, you know, I'm not sure where we can go, especially because we do hear that we're top heavy in administration, we're top heavy in our district office. In reality, that's just not true. It's just not true. The example I'll give you is Amherst Public Schools, Amherst Pelham. I'm not trying to compare us to Amherst Pelham.
So we're better, we're better.
We are far better. We're far, because we do have a lot of good people.
Yes.
I'm not trying to compare, but they have 22 additional central office staff members to us. 22 on top of, if you did the comparison analysis, you know, superintendent, you break out the 12 people that we really have. I wasn't counting food service director. They have 22 additional staff members in their central office. 22. I'll take one. No, I'm just kidding. But that's a big difference. So what I'm trying to say is that, you know, Dudley Charlton, even before I got here, has done a lot to try to trim on the edges, but the edges are really, really thin. They're really thin. And so when you look at operations and maintenance, and I know that that's coming up because we're bringing capital projects forward as well. And it was tough to compare them out of the 319. And the reason being is because a lot of the 319 are municipalities, so they have cost sharing. They share whether it's highway service or plowing, you know, how they report all their finances. So the lowest district, 319, you'll never guess who number 319 is when it comes to operations and maintenance. Lexington, the town of Lexington.
Wow.
But it's because almost all of their services are from the town. All of their fields, maintenance, all of that is from the town. But they are low, so it's hard to compare it. So the only comparison that I could really utilize is where do we sit with all other regionals? And we are 79 out of 84 when it comes to operations and maintenance, you know, how we take care of our facilities. 79 out of 84. And we are we are one of the ones obviously with 7 schools. That's something that needs to be pointed out too. Some of these have 2 schools, 3 schools. You know, we have 7 buildings that we're trying to take care of. And per pupil expenditure, again, because of the operations and trying to square that number, we're 80 out of 84 regionals when it comes to total per pupil expenditure for our students. So again, the whole point of that isn't to complain. The whole point of that is to point out that our reductions coming forward, and this includes what I believe next year too, because we don't have the financial structures, is we're going to keep looking at the classroom. We're going to have to keep going to the classroom. And that's a difficult pill to swallow for me as a superintendent who's supposed to advocate for children and classroom instruction, and it's going to be tough for the communities as well. We already heard this feedback on foreign language, but there are other areas, you know, I don't know where else to go from a superintendent's perspective or even as an administrative council on reduction. And the reason being is because if you look at the green circle, we're sitting pretty well when it comes to our funding for directed towards students. So if you look at the 319 communities, the cost for educators in our district is 176 out of 319. That's a great spot to be. If you look at instructional materials, well, 156 out of 319, again, a great spot to be. Even that's even with level funded in those accounts. It's still a great spot to be. Student services, 142 out of 319, again, a great spot to be. But that's the bulk of our finances. That's where the reduction is going to have to start coming from. And that's hard to swallow. Okay. So the next page, page 9, talks about, you know, what the state provides us for support, 28,247,892. And what budgets would look like with the percentage increase to them. And then you have the bottom paragraph, because I'm asked the question about enrollment. You know, is that special to Dudley Charlton? That's not special to Dudley Charlton. So the reason, the information I'll give you to back that up is on the bottom, 43% of the districts in the state are receiving the minimal state aid, which means that the state believes that they're overpaying it because of these decrease in enrollment. So it's not just Dudley Charlton, it's 43% of the 319 districts in our state are receiving a minimum state aid. So that represents about $9 million. The 57% of other communities are going to be splitting $475 million in state aid. So it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense, but Dudley Charlton is within that 43% category, and it's not a regional, it's not just solely a regional issue, that these are municipalities as well. That, you know, that again, enrollment has dropped, enrollment across our state has dropped. So it's not just a Dudley Charlton thing, but because of that, we are receiving the minimum state aid. So the number 10 is just a review of the two things we talked about, and actually adds the 1.7% if we were actually to go to 1.7, and what that would look like for continued reductions.
And just to be clear, Mr. Lamarche, it's all three categories. So meaning we have to lose it all if we got to 1.7.
Yes, everything there.
Just to be clear, right?
It's all reductions.
All reductions.
It's all reductions.
Yeah.
And so then we get to the assessment sheets, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. Actually, before we get to the assessments, if I could have you take a look at the second page of the handout I gave you, the 5 pages put together. The top of the first page says that the Charlton Regional School District 2022-23 initial adoption budget summary. The second page is our revenue summary page. And as Superintendent Lamarche indicated, we're receiving the minimum amount of Chapter 70 additional aid for FY23 based on the governor's recommended budget. We're also projected in that budget to have our regional transportation reduced by close to $200,000. Again, there's an increase in charter students going out. So as a result, the state formula, at least for the first couple of years, will give us some revenue to help offset that. So we've included 100,000 of that. But the net decrease, yes, the net decrease of revenue is $6,790 when you look at state funds and district funds. There's no place to go when you have a net decrease of $7,000 in revenues that should be at a plus 500,000 or more in order to have a viable ongoing budget. So as a result, the burden falls to the two towns. So that's why, you know, we presented the various scenarios that we did and why we made the modifications to those scenarios in this initial budget recommendation that the school committee adopted last week. It was clear that nobody was going to want, like, or accept a 4.6 whatever % increase in our operating budget. So we knew we had to bring that down. We were able to do that with the health insurance savings. That's why we moved the position from the operating budget into the ESSER grant. Last year, a number of positions that are in the ESSER grant for this year and for the next 2 years were positions that were proposed as part of the operating budget. The discussion was we can't afford that. So we did have to move those positions because they were critical to the continued reopening of schools and the continued return to normalcy for the district. You know, ideally, we would have been able to use those for some of the repair projects that we have at the schools that would be eligible under the ESSER rules. But again, when we're forced to use it for personnel, we have no place to go. So, you know, again, as a result, you know, with state revenues and our continued funding from E&D, from Medicaid, and from, you know, the reserve for transportation, with a net loss, we're just here to say, please help us save as many positions as possible for the next year. You know, we talked about health insurance. I went back and since 2017, I believe it was, we've basically had a 2% increase in health insurance. We've reduced our transportation lines. We've tackled the big numbers. You know, we helped to create the Mass Strategic Health Group, the Health Insurance Consortium, and that's what's helped us reduce those health insurance expenses over the last couple of years. But all of those concentric circles, all of those big numbers have been tackled. There's no place else to go except the core, and the core is the classroom. You know, so again, we're here to ask you to help us save as many positions as possible.
Okay.
In terms of the assessment, if you want to take a look at the next page, you can see the assessment broken down. I know there was a question about the computation of this, of the assessment. And the question, well, the expenses aren't split 53-47. So when you take a look at this, it's the required assessment per the state formula for Charlton of $11,793,404. And then all of the other expenses, any amounts above that, including transportation, those are the expenses that are split at that 53-47 mark. So again, I know that was a question that was out there. I've been asked that by a couple of school committee members to help explain that. So hopefully that does do that. But again, it's, you know, when we have a $2 million or almost a $2.1 million increase, and none of that is coming from the state level, again, unfortunately, it does fall to the communities. You know, Superintendent LaMarche talked about the fact that the state believes they're overpaying us. They think they're funding us in our Chapter 70 by $1.4 million. I'd ask one of their experts to come in and point where we can save $1.4 million, but that would be foolhardy on my part. But that combined with, you know, the fact that Dudley is $1.4 million shy of its target. And Charlton this year, you know, these numbers vary each and every year, so it's a moving target. But this year, with the inflationary factors that were included in the formula, Charlton is now about $800,000, if not more, short of its target. And a couple of years ago, you were above target, and you're actually having decrements to the required spending. You know, so again, a number that varies each and every year. But right now, when you do the math, if the state says we owe them 1.4, but the towns owe us 2.2, I'll take that 800,000 as a win. So you can make it payable to Dudley Charlton Regional School. Again, that's just, you know, that's one of the factors that we have to deal with. You know, these things are run by formulas. The formulas for determining target contribution and required contribution are not based on levy limits and your actual taxing ability. It's based on the theoretical ability to pay of tax returns and equalized value of property. That's great, but that doesn't mean that you actually have the cash to contribute, you know, just as Dudley doesn't in those formulas. So, you know, where in some ways regionals are trumpeted as, you know, one of the better things to help reduce expenses, help save costs and all of that. But sometimes regionals aren't factored in appropriately into the formulas to make it so that it's a budget that we can survive with. So again, we're here, you know, with a budget of survival.
Bottom line, are we handicapped by being a region?
Again, there are cost savings involved there. You know, if you weren't a regional, you would have, you know, each town would have a superintendent, each town would have a business manager, each town would duplicate the functions. That's the whole point of regionalizing. You know, that said, the state has, I don't think, ever lived up to its 100% promise for regional transportation. It may have one year. It's come closer in the last few years. There's been a lot of advocacy. Particularly Senator Goby, you know, is very strong as she represents a number of regions. You know, this year for FY22, the number originally was going to be around 80% from what I understood. But because of the advocacy of Senator Goby and some of her colleagues, that number is looking to be more like 90%. So again, that's much better than, you know, 70s and 80%, but still short of 100%.
Okay.
If I could go on a limb, because I know the deregionalization is a question that's come up, and I've been asked the question as well. I was part of a district that did do that. I was part of a community that separated from a regional school district. And I just want to be clear, it costs years of litigation and millions of dollars just to get to go. Could there be cost savings for Charlton to be its own district and own community at some point in time? One, maybe in pride without question, with ownership without question, but there's a heavy cost just to start that, because you're dealing with facilities. You'd have to separate out the facilities, who owns what. Then you tap into who's going to own the retirees and the liability on retirees. There's you know, I'm not going to throw out a number there, but I'm going to say millions of dollars just to enter into that process in its years for a process. So I've had the experience as a building principal and to be part of the deregionalization. I was the first principal in the town middle school in 50 years when they deregionalized. And I was on many committees, but it can be done. I don't want to say it can't be done. This was Pembroke out of Silver Lake, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of resources and money.
No, I understand, Stephen, and I'm not advocating.
No,
one way or another.
I just wanted to talk about it because I know I've been asked.
Right.
And it generally comes from Charlton. Charlton seems to be the community that asked me that question. So I figured, again, it's beyond what we're talking here, but I figured I'd at least throw it out there, given the question that was asked for Rich.
If I could comment on that
Yes.
too, I get that question all the time. And the one comment I can make as a taxpayer and as a resident and from my lens, for Charlton to build a new high school would be $150 million. We have troubles funding a fire station. The taxpayers don't want to pay for a fire station. I mean that with all due respect to the taxpayer. I'm just making the point, we're talking 30 million versus 150 million. So that's an expense that the town would have to incur to build a high school. So that, I just wanted to put it out there.
And then you gotta wonder, can a single town district offer all the programs and services we already have? up there
Exactly.
That two towns share. I mean, it's just a lot more programs and services.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not an advocate for deregionalization, but I wanted to put it out there so the public can see the point, these points.
And that's the benefit of this kind of forum, is we can get all the questions
Exactly,
out there.
exactly.
Just answer. Any other things on your operating budget that you want to point out or make us aware of?
The only thing is
You hit the high points.
Yeah. This is my third budget, and I just don't see this changing next year. I see us coming in with more concessions. I don't see, and this is no fault of Charlton, this is no fault of us. It just seems to be the financial structure of where we're at.
Yeah.
So I hate to be, I was gonna say Debbie Downer, but I would feel bad for every Debbie out there. I hate to be, I hate to sound pessimistic, but this seems to be the pattern we're in, and I just wanted to make sure you know that I'm aware of that. Okay.
If there's nothing else on the operating, you want to bring us up to speed on your capital plans over the next few years, so we know where we're headed.
So we've been working on phase one. We did present phase one, which was the roofs. We did present to Board of Selectmen in both communities. Roofs, some required fire updates, fire panels, fire alarms. And we talked about some communication and security as well. And then we talked about some architectural review of our buildings. The one item that was originally on there was for us to bring forward completing the Shepherd Hill field project, which was to actually put in permanent bleachers. So right now we're leasing bleachers, and for news outlets, that's about $30,000 per year. Every now and then it does kick up to 60 when it comes to
The first renewal year.
the first renewal year. So we understand that, we were asked the question, what is because of the cost of bleachers, because that project would have to go in and be ADA compliant, it would require restrooms and all that, and that's a very expensive project. We could certainly try to cut that down, but I think the message we received in phase one is to not really pursue that at this point in time, to really look at the roofs at Charlton Middle School, and obviously other safety, security, and fire panels. So that's kind of what we're looking at for phase one moving forward. The other point too is because we are in the beginning stages with MSBA, maybe something with the field could come up through the MSBA process, but that would really be determined by what's reimbursable and what the community would want to pay for when it comes to those bleachers, because I don't know if the cost would be covered by MSBA to put those bleachers in. So we are pulling that off at this point in time to move forward with phase one for this. So that's kind of the details of what phase one is. I'll let Mr. Matthew talk about process and timelines.
Yeah, so the intention was to get out to the boards of selectmen, FinCom, et cetera, and get some initial feedback. And we've done that process. We've certainly heard that, it doesn't make sense at this point in time to include the bleachers in this particular phase of the project. So the next steps, Dudley had asked us to go back and secure some actual specified quotes, update the quotes for the roof, those sorts of things. So we're doing that and expect to have that information in the next couple of weeks. And then we'd be happy to meet with the capital planning committee if you have such an entity, or yourselves again, to review that, as well as those smaller, those $25,000 to $100,000 item, the cost of items that we would want to talk to you about funding as part of your annual funding of capital projects for the other departments in the towns.
Right. No new buildings? No
Where?
new buildings, right?
Where for
Anyway,
well,
no schools,
no,
no nothing.
no new building.
Okay.
So that's the capital plan and capital project moving forward on those items. And then we have the MSBA that we could talk about as well. So Mass School Building Authority, the district has been applying for, it ended up being 14 years. I think it was 12 years in a row or something like that. But there were other years prior to that. In MSBA, it's only at the very initial stages. It's an honor to be invited in, but there's a lot of work to be done. It doesn't mean just because you're invited in, it's a done deal. There's a lot of work to be done. But again, I've had the experience with
No, but I'm
MSBA.
curious, what have you been invited in for?
Eligibility to determine, so it's called eligibility period. So we have a lot of homework to do to provide more information. So I sent out a statement of interest. Statement of interest is just kind of like a kind of a submission that gets you to eligibility. Eligibility is where you start formulating your communities around setting up a building committee, looking at what direction do we want to go in. As far as a facility, what is the educational plan for it? We have to provide far more information to MSBA moving forward with our 319 out of 319 administrative office. We have to do that. So this is probably the toughest part on a district because it's all front-loaded work by us to MSBA. And then after eligibility, if we cross all the T's and dot the I's and prepare the communities, and the communities are well prepared for it, which requires a lot of communication. And our starting point, just so you know, is September 1st of next year. For all this, that's when clocks start ticking for MSBA and eligibility period. It's 270 days you can be in the eligibility period. And after that, the MSBA likes to vote to take you to feasibility study. Feasibility study would be the next phase of that. And so we take all the information that we put together for them, and they believe that we cross the T's and dotted the I's, not only ourselves as a school district, but also with our two communities. Then they would invite us into the feasibility study. And so there would be a process of looking for support for feasibility, finances for feasibility study. The good news on the feasibility study is the entire feasibility study is reimbursable at whatever rate is set. So if it's a 60 cent, I'm not sure what our rate is today, but if it's 60 cents on the dollar, 60% of the feasibility study that was approved by the communities would be reimbursed. But you have to get to feasibility study. Every one of these requires an endorsement by MSBA and a vote to get to the next phase. And that wouldn't happen until at least 270 days after September 1st.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So we're not talking about anything that impacts this fiscal year or even next fiscal year, doesn't sound like. Well, maybe next fiscal year if you get into the feasibility phase and.
Well, they're very kind, and they always say to us, MSBA, that you can go out and get your feasibility money now if you want. And in return, we say, thank you for the support and us going out in front and getting that now, but we're going to try to work with you through the stages so that we know exactly what we're saying and what we're actually asking for. So there are some communities, obviously, that have no problem, at a town meeting passing for feasibility studies for the schools, but we want to be a little bit more methodical about that and not ask for that now. So, okay.
Good.
And we're advocating for a renovation.
Yes. Yes.
Not a tear down and rebuild.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious what the end project was.
Mr. Lamash and Mr. Matthew and I have talked, it's like from start to finish, it's 3 years to shovel in the ground.
Yeah.
But you have to go through a lot of community forums and ask for community feedback. So the project I was involved with before started through the eligibility period as something, and through all of the forums, it ended up as something completely different. Because that's what the community wanted at the end of the day. It's not what Steve Lamash wants. It's not what school administration, it's what the community ends up wanting. So that's why you have to go through, it's a very prescribed process, and both communities have full input on what that will look like through a series of community forums. Okay.
No, appreciate the feedback on that.
Yeah.
Anybody get anything else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You're basically saying that the state is pushing this onto us. What's it going to take for the state to change?
Trying to think of where I was able to influence the state to change.
Do we have a lot of time this evening?
I don't know, they just recently reworked their Chapter 70 formulas. And when they did that, I forget which year that was, 16, 17?
17, 18 maybe?
Somewhere in there. So what happened with that, and the reason why they were pushed for that is because the legislators had some constituencies that pushed to say change the formula. So what happened was those that felt like they were like us, that the formula wasn't working for them, some of the changes, I'm not going to say, I don't know this for facts. Some of the changes help those communities and hurt others. Because that's what the formulas do.
Right.
So what it's going to take for them to change, they're going to have to go back in and look at Chapter 70 formula again and say, we've got to relook at how this works.
Well, and to your comment, it's gonna hurt another community, so they're gonna advocate not to change it, the ones that are benefiting. So, and we're competing with the 136 districts that fall in that category, the 43% that only get the minimal increase. So it's not just us, it's 136 districts in the state. Not that that makes it any better.
You know, thank you for the answer. And I've heard that before. Let me just kind of redirect the question a little bit. The percent increases year over year that keep coming, including the concessions that you have to take. None of this is sustainable. You've said that, right? The federal government can print money. The towns can't do anything, but the state can write laws that change stuff. So help us as a community talk to the state and put some of our anguish and angst into something that can actually gain traction to make some changes.
We do, like my organization, Mass Association of School Superintendents, we have a legislative arm to that, and they try to advocate for all of us. It's Senator Goby, who's no longer representing here, but our representative groups. Senator Goby was known as a regional, the leader of regionals, and so she's been advocating for years and it hasn't changed. So they do have our ears. We are pushing as much as we possibly can. I'm not sure, again, I don't know what the secret sauce is to get them to change, how this works for Dudley Charlton and for the community of Charlton. But I hear what you're saying. I don't know, Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. So as I indicated, the state believes that they pay us $1.4 million more than they need to under the formula. But number is actually down from, I think it was, and this is off the top of my head, so please don't run to the bank with this. I think it was $2.4 million last year. So the Student Opportunity Act certainly has lessened that amount, but it's still, well, I'm going to use some tough words, ridiculous on the face of it, that somehow they think that they're paying us $1.4 million more, and somehow the Dudley and Charlton should, just pick up that extra amount. There's no good place to go there, but again, unfortunately, when you're only dealing with numbers and you're dealing, again, specifically with a formula that does not address your taxing abilities, but rather your theoretical ability to pay, there's, I believe, an assumption baked into that thought process that, communities are just going to pass overrides left and right and willingly, increase tax bases and all those sorts of things. And that may be true for some communities, but it's not true for other communities. So I really wish the state could come up with a final formula that was able to incorporate ability to pay as well as theoretical ability to pay.
Oh, I'm sorry. To answer your question, the same as the Massachusetts Association of School Committees also has some legislative connections in Boston, and they're pushing as well and advocating for schools across the state as well. So another avenue, just to answer your question.
And we're not going to leave any stone unturned. So if people have ideas about how we can reduce costs in our district, we'll take them, we'll explore them, we'll look for ways to do that. So that's why in our prior presentation, which wasn't this evening, we talked about regionalizing our middle schools. Now, would our communities want that? I have no idea. Initially, I don't think so, because that's what I received a lot of feedback on. But that is a way for cost savings within our district to sustain the fixed cost and the contractual obligations moving forward. It's one piece of the puzzle for doing that, but we'll take any idea to do that. One of the things we're looking at too is, where we sit with our enrollment in all of our schools. Can we change some of the grade configuration? But that will take some community input on that as well. But we'll take the feedback on all that ideas.
And the bottom line, in my view, is it's where we as a community want to be, both towns, as far as our educational picture, because we are going to have to enter the classroom more and more every year and continue to reduce and increase class sizes. So again, it's school committee looks at it and presents a budget, but it's the people that decide, not the school committee, not the administration. If the folks want to, if the avenue is to continue to cut, then that's where we're going to go, because that's what the community wants. But in my view, as a resident and elected member, I'm concerned about how deep we're going to get into the classroom and affect our educational outcomes with students. So, that's where we're at.
No, well taken. Anybody got anything else?
I got a quick question.
Go
Did you
ahead.
say that the state only funded 90% of regional transportation? Was that what the number was?
For FY22, yes.
Okay.
And when's the last time they funded it 100%?
I don't believe ever, but
Ever.
but it may have been 1 year. Something tells me at some point in time it was 1 year.
Yeah, that's been a big sticking point, because that was the goal for regionalization. Regionalize, you'll get full reimbursement for transportation. That's never happened. As far as we know, don't quote us.
But a lot of the reimbursements are a floating percentage of reimbursement. It's never, it's 100%. And some years can be really dire and some years can be, in the 80s or 90s%. And that's any reimbursement that we entered into, whether it's transportation, a circuit breaker for students with disabilities, whether it's McKinney-Vento for educating students that are homeless, and transportation of foster children. Any one of those reimbursements that sometimes we can project and do the best we can for budgeting, but that could be on a change scale. And Mr. Matthew, I'm not sure if you said it or not, but obviously we're working off of the numbers we have now from the state. If something's changed, we're going to make those adjustments into the favor of the communities. It's not for the favor of the district. It will be for us as a district because we'll be working with you, but we'll work with you as a community on those if some of those things change from the governance budget.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, guys, just real quick. When you came in front of us a few months ago, or whatever it was, you mentioned that you're looking at potentially a spring vote on the capital projects, more specifically the roofs and safety. Do you have a timeline on that yet? Because I know a lot of us did not want to pursue a debt exclusion for it, so we'd have to consider how we're going to fund that, either a town meeting, either in May or October. So I know you mentioned Dudley, and I saw the article push back in a sense to say they want better estimates, but do you guys have an estimate at this point on when you'd be doing that vote?
No, I want to reach out to both town administrators and try to square that away. My takeaway was that it was something that should be done closer to the primary vote in September. So there was a ballot already available if indeed an exclusion was going to be looked at in either town. But again, I want to reach back out and clarify the facts there.
All right, Andrew, we know you talked about that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in tonight.
If anybody has any questions, please reach out. We're here to answer whatever may come up.
And ideas, I'll take ideas too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess we don't have W. Charlton Bay Path tonight.
I didn't see him.
Yeah.
So that means we cut the budget.
Yeah, you wish it were that easy, don't you? All right, Dan, I said I'd give you some time tonight. I'm gonna give you 5 minutes because I end these meetings no later than 9 o'clock. Right?
Well, it only says 12 minutes of eight.
Yeah, well, we go by the clock I look at.
All right,
okay?
okay. All right, I'm here to talk about your seniors.
I was
By
gonna say,
the way,
introduce yourself to the.
okay, my name is Dan Crowdy. I've lived in town for 42 years. And I consider myself a substantial taxpayer. My entities paid approximately $120,000 a year to the town. And I've never been a spendthrift, so I'm just after you to going to bat for the seniors tonight. What are you looking at for a total budget this year approximately?
32 and change.
All right, I'm looking for about 1/3 of 1%. Okay. So basically, it was brought to my attention that the senior center is they're allowed to have 45 people. And when they have an event, they have to double up. Did I give you this stuff?
No.
Okay. And then they have to, for example, they had a veterans luncheon and people turned around and went home because there's no parking. So came to my attention from the Pickle LeBlanc family that they would like to sell their property on 107 Dresser Hill Road. And talked to Andrew about it. He told me the budget's going to be tight. So I came up with a little formula here. Because I've done these deals before to put projects together. I was looking at this as a lease option.
So the town could lease the building. We could come up with a formula where the, a percentage of the 50% of the rent that would be paid over 5 years could be credited to the cost of the property. The also take into consideration that, you know, with the amount of some of these big projects coming to town, in a couple of years, the money would be available. For example, everybody hears about the Amazon project. I've been working with GFI in Hillwood to buy a parcel of mine on the Charlton Sturbridge line across from the Techman building. So that's approved for 1,400,000 square feet. I called the principal and I asked him, I said, what's your building permit gonna cost? And he says, the building permit is approximately $420,000. Okay. You know, I would figure that, okay, if that's 420,000, the Amazon building, much more expensive building should be about 600,000. So when I was on, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was on sitting with you guys were, you know, the permit fees went back into free cash. Okay. I would think the LNG project that originally was targeted for my land, that was $130 million project. So I don't know what the building, you know, the building permit fee for that should be. The other thing is the for the GFI Hillwood property, they're going to come before you for a TIF. So if you negotiated a TIF similar to what you did for Amazon, you know, maybe we can grab $500,000 towards the senior center. Okay. You know, another thing I thought of, and I mentioned in my explanation is next to the primary building, you have the smaller annex building. Hey, that could take care of your cable people, your shipping, and then you could sell the Maynard Farm property probably for $400,000 or $500,000. So we could even extend the lease for 10 years. So it'd be soft dollars is what I'm talking about. So, you know, maybe we're looking for $150,000 a year until you buy the building. So anyway, that was just, you know, the seniors I see, they're older than me. Okay, but I mean, yeah, I see you could probably have a facility within a year. And they are seriously handicapped down there, you know, I mean, you know, the offices are inadequate. They got a pool room, I guess you have to squeeze into. They have to, behind the kitchen, they have a small area for yoga. And 16% of our citizens are seniors. So, so anyway, I'm here on their behalf, and I think you should all go down and take a look and see what the seniors are working on a busy day. And, you know, a lot of people depend upon the 4 days a week that they can go there for lunch and you know, bring food home with them as well. You know, the other thing is that the Chip-In was next to this building. I've been told, you know, a big percentage of people that take advantage of Chip-In are elderly. The parking is much better. And I would invite you, if you've never been to that building, if you wanted to arrange a tour of it, I would take you through it, but it's a very easy building. You know, they need an office. Here's an example. They need an office for visiting nurse for blood pressure and, you know, other health reasons. Well, my idea is to go to UMass Harrington and get a donation for them to fund that renovation. You know, our offices, the building's wide open. You know, we could probably even work with Baypath, steel studs, sheetrocks, a door, you know, those aren't big expenses. The big expense I see is perhaps, even though this building was renovated and it didn't get a sprinkler system with water outside, I'm sure we might get caught with a sprinkler system. That's a big nut. I don't have that number yet. I'm estimating that could be $300,000. But, that could be put into the lease and added on to the cost down the road. But I think at one time there was a study, for a new senior center, it was in the millions. Well, that would be behind a fire station or police station, but this is really low hanging fruit. It's soft dollars, and I think we could structure it so it would not be a killer. So.
And you've laid all of that out pretty much, Dan, in the proposal that I can see. How it could be structured and all the rest of it. And this was nice. Have you seen anything like this?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I just got this done today. Okay.
All right, well, yeah, give Andrew and Ashley.
I'm sorry,
set also.
I've been working on these projects for some projects. My experiences. Another one. Yeah.
Dan, I get it off from there.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
No, but anyway, my experience is, I've been in the development business for 50 years. And I don't know if you live in the area. Until last year, I owned the Sturbridge Industrial Park. I developed that. And the 2 large buildings going up there now. And in Oxford, if you ever know where IPG Photonics is, that started out to be a soft dollar project. I got a call in March of 1999 from a friend of mine who used to work for a fiber optic company. And he said, hey, I got some good news and bad news for you. I said, what's the good news? He said, I need a $30 million semiconductor facility. And I said, okay, what's the bad news? He says, we don't have any money. But we grew from 30 to $60 million last year, and we're projecting 100 million. So I told him, I said, when I was a young guy, I bought a well drilling rig with $1 in my pocket. I talked to the Bank of Boston into lending me the money, and I started the Charlton Well Company with Pete Vigil. And it worked out. I sold out to Pete, he still got it. But anyway, I'm a big optimist in putting these deals together. So I raised the first $5 million for IPG. I financed the land. My friend Howard Borgard financed the site work. My friend Ray Aho from New Hampshire came down, financed the shells of the building. I raised $5 million from my friends. And
do I hear you volunteering to raise the $5 million?
No, but I'll tell you what, here's what I'm gonna do. I've already got a $100,000 matching grant by someone I know that says they can't believe how much public buildings cost.
Okay.
So I called them up. I said, put your money where your mouth is. I said, give me $100,000 for a matching grant, up to $100,000, okay? So he says, what do you have in the game? I said, I'll give you $10,000 to it. Now, the other thing is, I get a call into Sabrina Webb about the, nonprofit, for the ARP funds or ARPA funds. Okay, up to $20,000. Well, they have a friendly Friends of the Seniors nonprofit, okay? So now we got a 30-30 there, right?
Yeah.
And then working out, reaching out to the banks. And
I just want to hear that you're going to take the lead in trying to raise some of this cash.
No,
I mean, you're very good at putting people together like this, okay? You were doing it for the fire station. Maybe we can corner her into to help us out. But then I think we'll take a look at it. As you've heard, okay, you were here for some.
I heard that.
You heard what
I
we're
know
up
money's
against.
tight. I'm talking like 1% of 1%.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's face it, you got to do something the next 5 years for the seniors. This would get into that, but it'd be soft dollars and and I showed you, hey, there is some free cash coming in just from building permits perhaps. And I wouldn't be opposed to going to, like I said, if we get $500,000 out of the TIF that the other people go for. And the other.
We all, you missed this part because it was earlier. We all agreed that we're not spending any money we don't have in the bank.
No, I know. Well, but see, you've got a, let's say this came together in June or July.
Mhm.
Okay, or you know, we're into the or after into the fiscal year. We can, you know, we can stretch it out a little too. But
No, you know that the town can't afford whatever it took right now. I appreciate you coming forward with a plan, and I think we'll take a look at it. Bill, you ready to take a look at some alternatives, all right?
well, that's why I came up with the soft dollar plan. All
I
right,
appreciate it.
maybe I can raise enough money to get you through the first year and a half.
All right.
So,
I think the issue is probably year 5 is trying to spend it, because again, as you know, we got the fire station,
Yeah.
updates the police, we got the feasibility study, we have Shepherd Hill, and right there and there, you're looking anywhere from $50 to $60 million, and they actually, sorry, and the like capital roofs, which are gonna be plus the safety issues the schools want, that's 4 to 5, and that doesn't include any of the operating budget increases that the school districts want. So it's just a matter of trying to, well, what does the town want to prioritize? And just speaking for myself, I'm adamantly opposed to a lot of debt exclusions for anything I don't consider an absolute need. So that's the position we're in. There's an infinite number of needs and wants with a finite number of dollars, and we just got to figure out what's most important for us.
okay, I'll
So it's
just,
gonna be, no, I promised 9 o'clock, Dan.
okay, let me talk, I get through this, let me talk quick. Okay, I'm gonna show you how to pay for this with the savings, okay? Back when they had the town meeting to buy the land from the Sonic home, right? I got up and people thought I was nuts. There was a $20 million project. And I said, if I was building a $2 million house, I wouldn't look all over town and say, hey, here's an $18,000 lot and a hole to put it in. So when I read the numbers, the estimates by the project manager and the architects, $4.9 million for site. So that bears me out. Go out, spend $500,000 for a good lot, and spend $2 to $3 million for site work, and you save $2 million. Okay, and that's what happens. These architects come in. Okay, hey, we're 10% of the budget. They do not try to save you money. I would put together a building committee that would say, okay, with experience of building buildings, you know, when I start with a project, whether it's Goya Foods or IPG, you know, we know what the costs are, and then we build around that, and that's where you save the money. So anyway, I'll help you get the money. I'll raise the money, and I'll show you where to save the money so you can get more bang for your dollar. The other thing is, I gotta speak quick.
Yes, you got exactly 30 seconds.
No, but the other thing being that this whole thing in the state with prevailing wage, management, all this stuff, right? Why does it cost 2 to 3 times as much for a public project to get built than a private project? Like they protect, okay? I rest my case.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you coming up, appreciate your input.
Okay,
Okay, and I'll
thank
take,
you.
we'll take this seriously.
All right.
Anything else we got before we got 45 seconds to adjourn? Anybody got anything else they want to bring up? Anything?
Yeah, actually,
Ashley?
are we meeting with the, are we having a joint meeting
Yes.
with the school committee?
Or the school committee,
Yeah,
do we ever do that?
I think we should.
It wouldn't be a bad idea. The last time we did that, Bill, was
For-
3 years
Yeah, I was
ago.
gonna say, it was right before I got elected, so it was like 3 years ago. Because I'm still looking at that 403 versus what like we're asking for, and we gotta find a way to reconcile that one way or another. Either we eat it, or we gotta come up with a compromise.
But I can tell you it does raise money, but anywhere close to where we even are.
Oh, yeah, that's what I need. That's what I'm wondering, if we need that meeting of the Dudley Selectmen, Finance,
Yeah.
and
Right,
us.
the last time we did it was to talk about the last override.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm just throwing it out there to you, Hank, to say, look, we might need that conversation real quick.
I talked to their town accountant at school, and they were nowhere even near at the middle of the budget.
Really?
Where the 3 scenarios the school had originally given us, they were nowhere near even the middle.
I've heard more than that from the rumor, but that's what that we needed. Yeah, they're just not even.
Yeah, no, let them get in the room and actually say that, so we all know.
Right, exactly, because I think we need to have that discussion so we can finish up our budget. So again, I'm just throwing that out there to say,
Yeah.
I don't know how we do it, but I think we probably need the conversation.
Last year, we did their TAU,
Yeah, we just had,
Yeah.
we just had
and
finance.
us, yeah,
and-
the school finance, yeah.
oh, we
Just
did.
to see like where they were and where, like,
Yeah.
because obviously we're bound by Dudley, so.
Again, just something to think about. We need to And again, we only got 2 months till town meeting.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe that, 2 weeks from now.
Well, we want to meet with you guys a couple weeks from now, didn't we?
Well, that's the thing. you-
Right, I
you
thought,
guys were
right,
like
the
13th.
The 30th.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
30th.
the 30th, we're gonna just do us.
Yeah.
When you say us, you mean us?
Yeah, not selectmen, yeah.
Because we're probably more on the same page than with the schools and others.
Probably, yeah, we probably are.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah,
watch your
we're way
meetings
closer.
and I don't have too many issues with what you've been coming up with.
I mean, I want my cops outside.
I mean, unless you want like Andrew and I to meet with
I'm sorry.
Dudley's.
Yeah.
We can
Right.
do
I know, it's after that.
3:30.
It's after that.
Anyway, yeah, let's just figure it
No,
out.
the 20th, all right, so we will meet
The 30th.
us, the 30th, that's all, us, Andrew and
Yeah.
Ashley, okay?
Yeah.
Nine o'clock.
Why, you wanna come?